The rain falls in relentless, grey sheets, each drop dissolving into the slick, black asphalt. You sit in your car, a metal box within a larger metal box of traffic, going nowhere. The horns of other cars are a discordant symphony of frustration, a sound that echoes the tight knot in your own chest. Your workday was a series of small fires to be extinguished. Your phone is a constant source of demanding notifications, and a conversation from last night still leaves a bitter taste. You glance at the rearview mirror, and for a fleeting second, you don't see the cars behind you. You see your own face, tired, strained, and etched with a deep, familiar weariness. You see a person who feels trapped, a victim of circumstances, pushed and pulled by a world that seems indifferent, if not outright hostile. This feeling, this sense of being at the mercy of life's relentless demands, is a quiet epidemic of the modern age. We blame the job, we blame the economy, we blame our politicians, we blame the person who cut us off in traffic. We spend our lives trying to rearrange the external world, hoping that if we can just get the right promotion, find the right partner, or move to the right city, then, finally, we will find peace. We are convinced the problem is out there. But what if that is a fundamental misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity? What if the world is not the source of our suffering, but merely a surface? What if your life, in its entirety, with all its beauty and all its pain, is nothing more than a perfect, unflinching mirror, a mirror that does not judge, does not punish, but simply, and with absolute precision, reflects back to you the contents of your own heart, your own mind. This is the radical proposition offered by one of the world's most ancient wisdom traditions. It suggests a path away from the exhausting battle with the outside world and toward the quiet, fertile ground of our inner landscape. This path is the path of understanding karma, not as a cosmic system of reward and punishment, a scoreboard of good and bad deeds kept by some unseen deity, but as a simple, natural, and impersonal law, as real and as consistent as the law of gravity, the law of cause and effect, the law of action and its inevitable reflection. It is the teaching that the artist of your life, the one who chooses the colors, the strokes, and the subject, has always been and will always be you, the great mirror, understanding karma as a natural law, not a moral judgment. To begin our journey of polishing the mirror, we must first understand the nature of the mirror itself. In the West, the word karma has been absorbed into the popular lexicon, but in this process, it has been distorted, often imagined as a kind of cosmic bookkeeping, a system of supernatural justice. We picture a celestial ledger where our good and bad deeds are tallied, and at some later date, a reward or punishment is dispensed from on high. We say, karma will get you, as a form of threat, or we perform a good deed and secretly hope for a karmic reward, as if we had inserted a coin into a universal vending machine. This view, while common, is fundamentally a misunderstanding, one that obscures the profound and empowering truth of the principle. This mistaken view breeds fear, superstition, and a sense of powerlessness, placing control in the hands of an unseen, judgmental force. To truly grasp the wisdom of karma, we must strip away these layers of myth and return to its simple, original meaning. The word karma in Sanskrit simply means action or to do. Its counterpart, vipaka, means fruit or result. Therefore, the law of karma is not a law of punishment, but a law of action and result, a law of cause and its corresponding effect. It is a description of how things work, not a prescription for how a divine being thinks we should behave. It is as impersonal, as consistent, and as natural as the law of gravity. Consider gravity for a moment. Gravity does not judge. If a saint drops a priceless Ming vase, it will fall, and shatter. If a sinner drops a worthless pebble, it too will fall. Gravity does not consider the moral character of the person or the value of the object. It is a neutral, inviolable principle of the physical universe. The law of karma is the equivalent of gravity for the world of our conscious experience. It is a natural law governing the consequences of intentional action. It simply states that every action we perform, driven by a specific intention, plants a seed in our mind and in the world. That seed, when the conditions are right, will eventually ripen and bear a fruit of a similar nature. This process is not magical or mystical. It is organic. It is the simple, observable logic of the universe. The most helpful way to visualize this is through the analogy of a farmer. The field is the world, and also the field of our own consciousness. The seeds are our actions. The harvest is the life we experience. If a farmer plants a seed from a sweet apple, the tree that grows will, in time, produce sweet apples. If he plants a seed from a sour, bitter crabapple, the tree will produce sour, bitter crabapples. He cannot plant a thistle and hope to harvest figs. The harvest is always in accord with the seed. Our lives work in precisely the same way. An action born of generosity, kindness, and understanding is a wholesome seed. It will, when the time is right, bear the fruit of friendship, trust, and inner peace. An action born of greed, hatred, and cruelty is an unwholesome seed. It will, inevitably, bear the fruit of conflict, suspicion, and suffering. This analogy also helps us understand why the results of our actions are not always immediate. A farmer plants a seed in the spring, but the fruit does not appear the next day. The seed must be tended. It needs soil, water, and sunlight. It needs the right conditions to sprout, to grow, and to mature. In the same way, a karmic seed, an action we have performed, may lie dormant within our consciousness for a long time. It waits for the right convergence of circumstances, what Buddhism calls conditions, or duyen, for it to ripen into a tangible result. This explains one of life's most perplexing questions. Why do cruel people sometimes seem to prosper, while kind people suffer? We are not witnessing a failure of the law. We are simply witnessing the complex and overlapping timelines of planting and harvesting. The cruel person may be enjoying the harvest from a wholesome seed planted long ago, while their present cruelty is planting new, poisonous seeds that will ripen in the future. The kind person may be experiencing the ripening of a difficult seed from their past, while their present kindness is ensuring a future harvest of peace and happiness. The mirror of life does not lie, but it reflects a story that is much longer and more complex than what we can see in a single moment. It reflects the entire history of our garden. What truly elevates this principle beyond simple, mechanical action and reaction is the crucial element of intention. In Buddhist teachings, the most important aspect of any action, the very heart of the karmic seed, is the intention behind it. The Pali word is cetana, and the Buddha said that cetana itself is karma. It is the will, the volition, the conscious purpose that drives the action. This is what makes the law of karma a law of the mind, not just of the physical world. Let us imagine two people giving money to a homeless person. The external action is identical. However, the first person gives the money reluctantly, annoyed by the interruption, and perhaps does so only because other people are watching. Their intention is rooted in aversion and a desire for social approval. The second person gives the money with a genuine upwelling of compassion, with a sincere wish for the other person to be free from suffering. Their intention is rooted in love and empathy. While the external act was the same, the karmic seeds planted were profoundly different. The first seed is weak, perhaps even unwholesome. The second is a powerful, wholesome seed that will purify the mind of the giver and bring about a corresponding positive result in their life. The mirror reflects not just what we do, but why we do it. The quality of our heart, the motivation in our mind, is the brightest color in the painting of our lives. There is an old story that illustrates this with beautiful clarity. A hunter was moving silently through the forest, his mind focused entirely on his prey, a magnificent stag he had been tracking for days. His intention was singular: to kill. This intention was a powerful seed of violence, shaping his every thought and perception. As he finally cornered the stag in a clearing and drew his bow, ready to release the fatal arrow, he saw something that stopped him. The stag was not alone. It was a mother deer, and beside her, nestled in the grass, was her newborn fawn, utterly vulnerable. In that moment, the hunter's world shifted. The fierce intention to kill dissolved, replaced by an overwhelming sense of awe and compassion. He saw not a target, but a mother protecting her child. The predator in him vanished, and the protector was born. He slowly, carefully, lowered his bow and backed away, leaving the new family in peace. From the outside, one could say nothing happened. He did not kill, but he also did not perform a grand act of saving. Yet, on the inside, a monumental karmic event had occurred. The powerful, unwholesome seed of the intention to kill was rendered impotent, and in its place, a luminous seed of compassion was planted in the soil of his mind. That single, silent shift of intention changed the entire trajectory of his inner world, and consequently, the world that would be reflected back to him in the future. Understanding karma as this natural, organic law of intentional action is the first and most crucial step in taking back our power. It moves us from a state of being a fearful child, waiting for the judgment of an unseen parent, to that of a wise and conscious gardener. We are no longer victims of a random and chaotic world. We are not being punished or rewarded by an external force. Instead, we are the creators of our own experience. The life we are living today is the harvest of seeds we have planted in the past. The life we will live tomorrow will be the harvest of the seeds we are planting right now, with every thought, every word, and every action. The great mirror of the world is neutral. It does not create the image. It does not judge the image. It simply reflects, with perfect fidelity, what is placed before it. If we do not like the reflection we see, it is pointless to get angry at the mirror. It is futile to try and smash it. The only sane and effective course of action is to change the object that is being reflected. We must learn to consciously and skillfully choose the seeds we plant. And to do that, we must first understand the source of all these seeds, the ultimate origin of every action. We must turn our attention from the reflection in the mirror to the face that is looking into it, the mind itself, the source of the reflection, the mind as the ultimate creator. If our life is a mirror reflecting the law of karma, the natural principle of action and result, we must then ask the most fundamental question: where does action truly begin? Before a word is spoken, before a hand is raised, before a single step is taken, there is a source, a wellspring from which all our deeds arise. That source is the mind. The most famous and foundational text in the Buddhist canon, the Dhammapada, opens with a verse that encapsulates this entire teaching, a statement as profound today as it was over 2.5 millennia ago. Mind precedes all phenomena. Mind is their master. They are mind-made. If with an impure mind one speaks or acts, then suffering follows one, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox. If with a pure mind one speaks or acts, then happiness follows one like a shadow that never departs. This is not merely a poetic assertion. It is the central pivot upon which the entire path to freedom turns. It declares that our experience of reality is not a passive reception, of an objective, external world. It is an active creation, a continuous process of interpretation, coloration, and construction performed by our own consciousness, moment by moment. The world we inhabit is not the world as it is, but the world as our mind paints it. To understand this, let us return to the image of an artist. The mind is the artist, and the raw data of the world is its canvas and subject. Imagine a landscape on a gray, overcast day. The objective facts are simple. There is a certain temperature, a certain amount of moisture in the air, a certain level of light. These facts are neutral. Now, an artist whose mind is filled with sorrow and despair approaches this scene. On their palette are the dark colors of their mood: loneliness, hopelessness, anxiety. They paint the landscape using these colors. The trees become skeletal and menacing. The sky looks heavy and oppressive. The entire scene radiates a feeling of gloom. It is a true reflection, not of the day, but of their inner state. Later, another artist approaches the very same scene. This artist's mind is filled with peace and contentment. On their palette are the subtle, gentle colors of their tranquility, coziness, introspection, gratitude. They paint the landscape with these colors. The soft gray light becomes gentle and soothing. The damp air feels cleansing. The trees stand in quiet dignity. The resulting painting is one of peace and subtle beauty. The external scene did not change in the slightest. The light, the air, the trees remained the same. But the experienced reality, the world that was created and inhabited by each artist, was profoundly, drastically different. This is what it means to say that mind is the creator. The events of our livsa promotion at work, a critical comment from a friend, a traffic jamare like the neutral landscape, they are the raw data. It is the quality of our mind, the colors on our palette, that determines the final masterpiece of our experience. This creative process is happening constantly, so automatically that we are seldom aware of it. Our perception is not a clear window. It is a complex lens, ground and tinted by our entire personal history, our beliefs, our fears, our desires, and our karmic conditioning. When we walk into a room, we do not simply see a room, we filter it. If we are hungry, our attention is immediately drawn to the bowl of fruit on the table. If we are tired, we notice the comfortable-looking chair. If we are feeling insecure, we might notice the expensive art on the wall and feel a pang of inadequacy. The room does not change, but the room we experience is a unique construction, built from the pieces our mind chose to highlight based on its current state. We are not cameras passively recording reality. We are projectors, casting our own inner world onto the screen of the outer world and then mistaking it for an independent film. We do not see things as they are, we see them as we are. The mirror of life does not reflect the world back at us. It reflects our mind's interpretation of the world back at us. This is a subtle but life-altering distinction. It means the source of our suffering is not in the world, but in the lens through which we view it. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this truth. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long journey. Their monastic vows included a strict rule of celibacy, which they interpreted as not even touching a woman. As they walked, they came to a river where the current was swift and the bridge had been washed away. A young woman stood at the river's edge, clearly frightened to cross on her own. Without a word, the senior monk walked up to her, lifted her into his arms, carried her across the turbulent water, and gently set her down on the opposite bank. He then bowed slightly and continued on his journey. The junior monk was speechless with shock and outrage. For the next several hours, he walked behind his companion in fuming silence. His mind was a storm of judgment. He broke his vows. How could he touch a woman? What a disgrace to our order. I must report him when we get back to the monastery. His mind painted the senior monk as a hypocrite, the event as a transgression, and his own heart as a vessel of righteous indignation. He was carrying the weight of the entire incident in his mind, and it grew heavier with every step. Finally, unable to contain his turmoil any longer, he rushed ahead and confronted the older monk. "How could you do that?" he demanded. "Our vows forbid us from touching a woman, yet you lifted her in your arms and carried her. You have broken our most sacred precepts." The senior monk looked at his agitated companion with a calm, compassionate expression. He replied softly, "Brother, I left that woman by the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This question cuts to the very heart of our exploration. The external event of the carrying of the woman was a temporary, finished act. The senior monk performed an act of simple compassion, unburdened by rigid attachment to the letter of the law, and once it was done, his mind was free. He let it go. The junior monk, however, took that external event and pulled it inside his own mind. He coated it with the sticky colors of judgment, clung to it with attachment, and allowed it to become the source of hours of self-inflicted torment. The problem was never the woman or the river. The problem, the source of all that suffering, was created and sustained entirely within the junior monk's own mind. He was not burdened by an external act, but by his own internal reaction. This ancient story is our modern life in miniature. The demanding boss, the difficult relative, the political climate, these are the woman by the river. They are external phenomena. We believe they are the source of our stress, our anger, our anxiety. But in truth, our suffering comes from the way we mentally carry them long after the interaction is over. We replay conversations in our head. We nurture grievances. We water the seeds of resentment. We allow the neutral data of the world to be painted by the dark colors of an undisciplined mind. The profound and liberating truth is this: while we often have very little control over the events that life presents to us, we have the potential for absolute control over the one thing that truly matters to our own mind. This is where true agency lies. The spiritual path is not about creating a perfect, problem-free world to live in. Such a world is an impossibility. It is about cultivating a perfect, problem-free mind to live in. A mind that can meet the imperfect world with equanimity, wisdom, and compassion. When we truly understand that our mind is the artist, we stop blaming the canvas for a painting we do not like. We pick up our tools and we learn to paint with more skill. The first step in this skillful painting is to understand the very brushes and pigments we use, the specific ways our mind creates and projects its reality onto the world. This brings us to the three fundamental gates through which all creation flows: our thoughts, our speech, and our physical actions. The three gates: thought, speech, and action. We have established that the mind is the artist, the ultimate creator of our experienced reality. But an artist, no matter how brilliant, needs tools to bring their vision to life. The mind is no different. It has three primary instruments, three fundamental channels through which its inner state flows outward to shape our world and create our karmic future. These are known as the three gates: the gate of thought, the gate of speech, and the gate of action. Everything we have ever done, said, or even conceived has passed through one of these gates. They are the conduits between our inner landscape and the outer reflection in the mirror of life. To become a conscious architect of our existence, we must become a mindful guardian of these gates, understanding that each one, from the most silent and secret to the most public and visible, is a powerful source of creation. And of these three, the most subtle, the most fundamental, and the most powerful is the one that opens first, the gate of thought. Every word that has ever been spoken, Every physical act that has ever been performed was first born as a thought, a fleeting image, a silent inner commentary, a flicker of intention. This is the genesis of all karma. Before the hand is raised in anger, there is the thought of anger. Before the donation is given, there is the thought of generosity. Before the lie is told, there is the thought of deception. Our mind is a silent, constant rehearsal space for our life. In the privacy of our own consciousness, we practice being who we are. This is why the Buddha placed such immense emphasis on the mind, for it is the root. We often deceive ourselves into believing that our thoughts are harmless so long as they remain private. We think, it doesn't matter if I have angry thoughts, as long as I don't act on them. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Every thought, in and of itself, is a karmic action. It is a seed planted directly into the soil of our own consciousness. A recurring thought of resentment towards someone, even if never voiced, is like practicing a piece of music. The more you rehearse it, the more easily you can play it. A mind that constantly rehearses thoughts of bitterness and judgment is training itself to perceive a bitter and judgmental world. It is polluting its own wellspring. Such thoughts strengthen negative neural pathways, making it easier for a harsh word or a cruel act to slip out when we are tired or stressed. Conversely, consciously cultivating thoughts of gratitude, forgiveness, or kindness is a powerful act of inner purification. Taking a moment to silently wish another person well, even a stranger on a bus, is a potent karmic action that plants a wholesome seed. It is the act of tending our inner garden, of pulling the small weeds of negativity before they grow into towering thickets that choke out the light. The gate of thought is the most important to guard, because nothing can pass through the other two gates without first being conceived here. The second gate is the gate of speech. Here, thought takes on form and vibration, leaving the private realm of our mind and entering the shared space between ourselves and others. Its power to create, to connect, to heal, or to destroy is immense. Our words can be bridges, or they can be weapons. In the Buddhist tradition, the practice of skillful speech is not merely about being polite. It is a deep and nuanced discipline aimed at creating harmony and truth. This is often summarized in 4 key guidelines for what to avoid. First, we practice abstaining from false speech. This means more than just avoiding outright lies. It means avoiding exaggeration that polishes our own image, omitting key facts to mislead someone, and even so-called white lies that, while perhaps well-intentioned, slowly erode the foundation of trust upon which all healthy relationships are built. Second, we abstain from slanderous or divisive speech. This is the poison of gossip, of speaking ill of others behind their backs, of carrying tales from one person to another to create discord. Engaging in such talk not only harms the person being spoken of, but it also poisons the social atmosphere and reveals a deep insecurity in the speaker. It is impossible to throw mud at another person without getting your own hands dirty. Third, we abstain from harsh speech. This is the language of aggression yelling, insults, cruel sarcasm, belittling comments. These words are not just sounds. They are energetic blows that can leave wounds far deeper and longer, lasting than a physical injury. They harden our own heart and create an atmosphere of fear and resentment around us. Finally, we abstain from idle chatter. This is speech that is aimless, pointless, and serves only to fill silence. It is the endless commentary on trivialities that clutters the mind and prevents genuine connection. The positive cultivation of this gate is to speak words that are true, kind, beneficial, and spoken at the right time. Let us trace the power of this gate with a simple, everyday story. Imagine a busy coffee shop during the morning rush. The barista is stressed, moving quickly, dealing with a long line of impatient customers who see him as just a function, a machine for producing their coffee. He is beginning to feel invisible and resentful. Then, a customer steps up. She, too, is in a hurry, but she takes a moment to look him in the eye. As he hands her the coffee, she smiles genuinely and says, "Thank you so much. I can see how hard you're working. You're doing a great job." These are simple words, but for the barista, they are a lifeline. In that moment, he feels seen, appreciated, human. The knot of resentment in his chest loosens. His energy shifts. He smiles at the next customer, a little more warmly this time. That customer, surprised by the pleasant interaction, feels a small lift in their own spirits. They get to their office and decide not to send the curt email they were planning to write, opting for a more constructive tone. This small wave of positivity, generated by a single instance of mindful, kind speech, continues to ripple outward in ways we can never fully trace. This is the creative power of the gate of speech. With every word we utter, we are either contributing to the world's suffering or to its healing. The third and final gate is that of action. This is thought made fully manifest in the physical world. It is the most visible and tangible form of karma. While we tend to think of action in terms of grand, dramatic gestures, changing careers, moving to a new country, saving a life, the vast majority of our karmic creation happens in the countless small, seemingly insignificant actions that make up our daily lives. The way you hold the door for the person behind you, the care with which you wash your dishes, the patience you show while driving in traffic, the gentle hand you place on a loved one's shoulder. Each of these is a brushstroke. Each one is a seed. When these small actions are infused with mindfulness and kindness, they weave a tapestry of peace and stability in our lives. When they are performed with carelessness, impatience, and aggression, they weave a tapestry of chaos and stress. The core of skillful action is the principle of non-harming, of refraining from intentionally causing physical harm to any living being. But it extends beyond that to the positive cultivation of generosity, not just of money, but of our time, our energy, our full attention. The simple act of putting down your phone and truly listening to someone is a profound act of generosity and a powerful karmic deed. These three gates do not operate in isolation. They are deeply interconnected, flowing one into the other. A negative thought can be stopped before it becomes a negative word. A negative word can be held back before it inspires a negative action. But they also reinforce each other. A kind thought makes a kind word easier to say. A kind word inspires a kind action. A kind action softens the mind, making kind thoughts more likely to arise. This can create a powerful upward spiral of wholesomeness, where our thoughts, words, and actions work in harmony to create a life of beauty and benefit for ourselves and others. We are, in every moment, standing as the guardians of these gates. We are weaving the fabric of our reality with the threads of what we think, what we say, and what we do. The reflection in the mirror is the direct result of what we have allowed to pass through. The crucial question that follows is, where does it all go? Once a thought, a word, or an action has passed through its gate, where is that karmic energy stored? How does it wait for the right conditions to ripen? This leads us to the concept of the mind as a vast and fertile field, a great storehouse where every seed we plant is kept in perfect trust. The storehouse consciousness, where the seeds of karma are planted. We have seen that our every thought, word, and deed passes through one of the three gates, creating a ripple in the world, a cause that will have a future effect. A critical question naturally arises from this understanding. Where does the energy of these actions go? A kind word is spoken, and the sound fades. An angry fist is clenched and then released. A generous thought arises and is replaced by another. The actions are fleeting, yet we have said their results are inevitable. How can a transient cause produce a lasting effect? The energy does not simply vanish into nothingness. It must be stored somewhere. The Buddhist tradition offers a profound and elegant model for this process, a concept known as the storehouse consciousness, or in Sanskrit, alaya vijnana. We can think of this as the deepest, most foundational layer of our mind, lying far beneath the turbulent surface of our everyday thoughts and emotions. It is not a physical location in the brain, but a vast, silent repository, a field of pure potential where the energetic imprint of every single action we have ever performed is stored. It is the ultimate memory bank, the personal archive of our entire existence. The most intuitive way to understand the storehouse consciousness is to return to our analogy of the farmer. If our actions are the seeds, then the alaya vijnana is the deep, fertile, and infinitely patient soil of our consciousness. This soil is fundamentally neutral. It does not judge. It will accept any seed you plant without prejudice. It will accept the seed of hatred just as readily as it accepts the seed of love, much like the earth will grow a poisonous nightshade or a nourishing tomato with equal impartiality. The process of planting a seed is described as perfuming or leaving a trace. When you perform an action driven by a strong intention, for instance, an act of intense anger, it's not just the external event that occurs. That energetic intention perfumes your deep consciousness, leaving behind a tiny, latent imprint, a seed of anger. In Sanskrit, this is called a bihar. This seed is not the anger itself, but the potential for future anger. In the same way, an act of selfless generosity leaves a bija of generosity, a latent potential for future generosity to arise. Every moment of our lives, we are relentlessly sowing our inner field with thousands of these seeds through our thoughts, words, and action. These seeds, once planted in the storehouse, mix together in the silent darkness. They are dormant, latent, waiting. This explains the often puzzling delay between a cause and its effect. A farmer may plant an acorn, but the mighty oak tree will not appear for many decades. The potential is there, held within the seed, but it requires specific conditions to manifest. This is the crucial role of what Buddhism calls conditions, or duyen. Our external life provides these conditions. Imagine our storehouse is filled with anger seeds from past actions. We may feel perfectly calm for a time, but then we get into our car and another driver cuts us off abruptly. This external event acts as the water and sunlight for one of those dormant anger seeds. Instantly, the seed sprouts, and we experience a surge of rage that feels automatic and overwhelming. The driver did not create our rage. They merely provided the condition for a seed we ourselves had planted to ripen. The result, the vipaka, or fruit, is the feeling of anger itself, which then compels us to honk the horn or shout an insult, thus planting a fresh, new anger seed back into the storehouse, reinforcing the cycle. We can also visualize this through the metaphor of a deep ocean. Our normal, waking consciousness, our plans, worries, daydreams, and inner chatteris, like the waves on the surface. This surface is constantly in motion, agitated, and reflects the light of the sky. But the nature of these waves is determined by the powerful, unseen currents moving in the vast, silent depths of the ocean below. The storehouse consciousness is these depths. All of our past experiences, our accumulated karmic potentials, are the currents moving slowly and powerfully beneath the surface. A sudden wave of unexplained sadness that appears on the surface of our mind may be the result of a deep current of grief being stirred in the storehouse. A powerful, irrational fear of something might be a deep-seated current of trauma from a long-forgotten experience. We spend our lives trying to calm the surface waves, But the real work is in understanding and purifying the deep currents that give rise to them. As long as the deep currents of greed and anger are flowing, the surface of our mind will never know true peace. For a more modern analogy, we can think of the Alaya Vijnana as an incredibly advanced and intelligent biological hard drive, combined with a cloud server. Every single experience, every thought, every choice is a data point that is instantly saved. Nothing is ever lost. But this is not a passive storage system. This hard drive runs a powerful learning algorithm. When we repeatedly save files tagged with anxiety, the system learns this pattern. It creates a shortcut on our mental desktop. The next time an ambiguous situation arises, the system's default protocol is to run the anxiety program, instantly bringing up all associated feelings, memories, and physical responses. Our habitual reactions are simply well-practiced programs running on old data from our karmic hard drive. The practice of mindfulness, in this analogy, is the act of becoming a conscious user. It is the moment we see the program about to run automatically and, instead of letting it, we use our executive will to click cancel. In that space, we can choose to write and run a new program of patience, of understanding, of peace. The implications of this teaching are truly profound. On one hand, it confirms that there is no escape from our actions. We cannot run from our past because we carry it with us, encoded into the very fabric of our being. The mirror of life reflects our storehouse, and we are accountable for everything within it. But on the other hand, this teaching offers the ultimate empowerment. Our past does not have to be our prison. The storehouse is not a fixed destiny written in stone. It is a dynamic, living field. While we cannot go back and uproot the seeds we have already planted, we can make a conscious decision right now to stop watering the unwholesome ones and to start planting and nurturing new, wholesome ones. If our inner garden is overgrown with the weeds of resentment and fear, we can stop planting more of the same. We can begin, today, to sow seeds of forgiveness, kindness, and courage. Over time, through diligent cultivation, the entire landscape of the garden will change. The flowers will eventually outgrow the weeds. This understanding also explains so much of our character, our innate affinities and aversions. Why are some people naturally gifted at music? Why do some have an irrational fear of heights? Why do we feel an instant connection with a total stranger? From this perspective, these are not random occurrences. They are the stirrings of powerful seeds planted in the storehouse long ago that have finally met the right conditions to sprout. Our life is not a series of random events. It is a perfect, logical, and continuous unfolding of the contents of our own consciousness. We are, in every moment, living in the garden of our own planting. Understanding this sets the stage for our next inquiry. How does this process of planting and harvesting create the repetitive, often painful cycles that make us feel so utterly stuck? The karmic loop, why we feel stuck in negative cycles. We now understand that our consciousness is a vast, fertile storehouse, a silent field where the seeds of all our past actions lie dormant. This explains how the effects of our actions are preserved over time, but it does not fully explain one of the most common and painful human experiences: the feeling of being stuck. This is the feeling of running in place, of fighting the same battles day after day, of finding ourselves in the same unhappy relationships or unsatisfying jobs, despite our best efforts to change. We feel as though we are caught in a current, being swept toward a destination we did not choose. This feeling is not an illusion. It is an accurate perception of a very real mechanism, the karmic feedback loop. This is the engine that drives our repetitive suffering. This is the process by which the ripening of one old seed creates the perfect conditions for planting a new seed of the very same kind, ensuring the cycle continues. This is the machinery of what the Buddhist tradition calls samsara, not as a grand theory of cosmic rebirth, but as a living, breathing process that happens moment to moment in our own minds. To break free from this loop, we must first see it clearly, to dissect its mechanics without judgment. The process can be understood in 4 distinct stages that flow seamlessly one into the next. It begins with the fruit, the ripening of a past karma. This is the first stage, an old seed from our storehouse consciousness, planted by a past action, meets the right conditions and sprouts. This might manifest as a sudden feeling of sadness that appears out of nowhere, a surge of anxiety in a quiet moment, or an external event, like receiving criticism from someone. This initial event is the vipaka, the fruit of a past cause. The second stage is feeling and perception. We experience this fruit through the faculty of feeling, or vedana, which is always one of 3 types: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Simultaneously, our perception, or sana, attaches a label to it. The sudden sadness is immediately felt as unpleasant and labeled as bad, or I am depressed. The criticism is felt as unpleasant and labeled as an attack. This happens in a fraction of a second, almost automatically. The third stage is the most critical, for it is where we forge the next link in the chain. This is reaction, or sankhara. Because we have labeled the feeling as unpleasant, our deeply ingrained habit is to resist it. We try to push the sadness away, distract ourselves from the anxiety, or mentally argue with the criticism. This very act of resistance, the tensing of the body, the inner monologue of blame or self-pity, the lashing out is a new intentional action. It is a new karma. And because this reaction is born from aversion and ignorance, it is an unwholesome seed. The fourth and final stage completes the loop. This new action, this reaction, immediately plants a fresh seed of its own kind back into the soil of the storehouse consciousness. By reacting to anxiety with more worried thoughts, we plant a new anxiety seed. By reacting to anger with a hateful word, we plant a new anger seed. The loop is now complete. We have not only experienced the fruit of an old karma, we have used that experience to plant another, identical seed, making the original tendency even stronger and its future ripening even more certain. Let us watch this loop play out in a familiar, modern scenario. An employee receives an email from their supervisor asking to revise a report. This external event is a neutral condition. However, it waters a dormant seed of insecurity in the employee's storehouse consciousness. This is stage 1. The fruit ripens as a painful feeling of inadequacy and stress. In stage 2, this feeling is immediately registered as unpleasant, and perception labels it. My boss thinks I'm incompetent. I'm going to get fired. This is unfair. In stage 3, the employee reacts. Trapped in the painful story created by their mind, they become defensive and irritable. A colleague then approaches their desk and asks a simple, unrelated question. The employee, still simmering in their own stressful narrative, snaps back with a curt, dismissive reply. This sharp reply, born of aversion and fear, is the new karma, the new action. In stage 4, this action plants multiple new seeds. It plants a seed of anger in their own mind. It creates genuine tension with their colleague, making the workplace environment objectively more stressful. And it reinforces their own core belief that work is a hostile, threatening place. The mirror of their life now reflects a more stressful reality, precisely because they reacted to stress with more stress-creating behavior. The next day, feeling even more on edge, they are even more likely to interpret a neutral comment as criticism, and the loop begins again, spiraling deeper, making them feel more and more like a victim of their circumstances. There is a powerful and poignant metaphor for this condition. Imagine a single fly, trapped inside a sunlit room. It sees the bright world outside through a large, perfectly clean pane of glass. All of its instincts scream that the way to freedom is toward the light. And so, with every ounce of its energy, it flies directly into the window pane. It hits the invisible barrier, falls to the sill, recovers, and tries again, buzzing with frantic determination. Over and over, it repeats the same strategy, the same desperate flight toward the light, only to be met with the same solid, unyielding impact. It is exhausting itself, caught in a painful, pointless loop, driven by a correct instinct move toward light, but a flawed strategy. All the while, just a few feet away, a door stands wide open, but the fly is so completely captivated by its struggle, so convinced of its failing approach, that it never diverts its attention to perceive the obvious path to freedom. We are, so very often, just like this fly. We are trapped in our karmic loops. We feel the pain of loneliness, and our strategy is to desperately seek validation on social media. We feel the sting of anxiety, and our strategy is to numb it with food or entertainment. We bang our heads against the same invisible walls, day after day, wondering why we are so bruised and tired, why we are not free. We are so fixated on our habitual reactions that we fail to see the open door, that is always there the possibility of not reacting at all, the path of mindful acceptance, the freedom of choosing a different response. This very cycle of repetitive, reactive suffering is the immediate, personal experience of samsara. We often think of samsara as some grand, metaphysical doctrine of reincarnation over countless lifetimes, but its most urgent and relevant meaning is found in these karmic loops. Every time we respond to greed with more grasping, we are turning the wheel of samsara. Every time we meet anger with retaliation, we are forging another link in our own chains. We are the fly at the window, and we are the ones powering our own struggle. The pain of feeling stuck is the pain of self-perpetuating motion. This realization should not be a cause for despair, but for a profound sense of hope. If we are the ones powering the loop, then we are also the only ones who can stop it. The cycle is not an external force being imposed upon us. It is a fire fueled by our own reactive energy. To break the cycle, we do not need to smash the window. We simply need to stop flying into it. We need to pause, to turn our attention away from the frustrating barrier and to look for the open door. To do this, we must first identify the specific types of fuel that we keep feeding into the engine. We must look directly at the most potent, most universal, and most distorting forces that keep us trapped in the loop. We must face the three great poisons of the mind, the fundamental delusions that smudge the mirror, and ensure that the reflection is always one of suffering. The three poisons: greed, aversion, and ignorance. We have seen how our lives can become trapped in self-perpetuating karmic loops, cycles of repetitive action and reaction that leave us feeling exhausted and powerless. Like the fly beating against the window pane, we now arrive at the very heart of the problem, the core of the machine that drives these loops. If our reactive patterns are the engine of suffering, then what is the fuel? The wisdom of the Buddha points to three fundamental toxins, three primary corruptions of the mind that distort our perception, motivate our unskillful actions, and guarantee our entrapment. These are known in the tradition as the three poisons. They are greed, aversion, and ignorance. These are not minor character flaws or simple psychological quirks. They are the deep foundational roots from which all other forms of suffering grow. Every branch of anxiety, every leaf of jealousy, every thorny stem of pride and fear can be traced back to one or more of these three poisonous roots. They are the primary colors of suffering from which all the miserable shades of our discontent are mixed. Greed, in its essence, is the desperate pull towards what is pleasant. Aversion is the violent push away from what is unpleasant. And ignorance, the most profound and subtle of the three, is the underlying darkness, the fundamental blindness that allows us to believe that this frantic pushing and pulling is a viable strategy for happiness. To break the karmic loop, to begin to truly polish the mirror of our life, we must become intimately familiar with these poisons, learning to recognize them not as irresistible forces, but as conditioned mental states that can be understood, weakened, and ultimately dissolved. We must turn our attention directly into the heart of the fire. Let us first examine the poison of greed, known in Pali as lobha. At its core, greed is the state of wanting, of craving, of clinging. It is the voice in our mind that whispers, or often screams, "I need that to be happy." It is the insatiable hunger for something more, something other than what is present in this moment. In our modern, consumer-driven society, we are most familiar with its material form. It is the relentless desire for a bigger house, a faster car, the latest smartphone, more fashionable clothes. The entire advertising industry is a monumental engine designed specifically to stimulate and exploit this poison, to create a perpetual sense of lack, to convince us that our current state is inadequate and that true happiness is just one purchase away. We chase these external things, believing they will finally fill an inner void. But the nature of greed is that it is never satisfied. The moment one desire is fulfilled, the moment we acquire the coveted object, the pleasure is fleeting, the shiny newness wears off, and the mind immediately identifies a new object of craving. The finish line for happiness is forever being moved just beyond our reach. This creates a life of constant, low-grade anxiety, the stress of striving for things we don't have, and the fear of losing the things we do. But greed extends far beyond the material. There is sensual greed, the addiction to pleasant physical and mental sensations. This can be the compulsive need for certain foods, the endless scrolling through social media feeds for a hit of validation, the binge-watching of shows to escape our own minds. We become junkies for pleasant feelings, frantically seeking the next fix and feeling irritated and empty when it is unavailable. Perhaps most subtly, there is emotional and intellectual greed. This is the clinging to relationships, the possessiveness that smothers love and turns it into a source of fear. It is the desperate need for approval, the craving for reputation and praise. It is the stubborn attachment to our own opinions, the need to be right in an argument, which closes us off from learning and connection. At its deepest level, it is the fierce, primal, clinging to existence itself, the attachment to our idea of me and the terror of its eventual cessation. The fundamental reason greed is a poison is because it is based on a lie. It is a war against the fundamental nature of reality, which is one of constant flux and impermanence. Everything we try to cling to are possessions. Our youth, our relationships, our very lives is, by its nature, transient. Like a person trying to hold water in a clenched fist, the tighter we squeeze, the faster it slips through our fingers. The suffering is not caused by the fact that things change. The suffering is caused by the act of clinging to them as if they were permanent. There is a beautiful Buddhist parable of a foolish monkey who sees a perfect, shining moon reflected in a pool of water. Believing the beautiful object to be real and attainable, the monkey reaches into the water, trying to grasp the reflection. But every time it tries, its own grasping hands shatter the image into 1,000 shimmering pieces. It becomes frantic, thrashing in the water, unable to understand why this beautiful thing is so elusive. The monkey's suffering comes from its failure to understand the nature of the reflection. It is trying to possess something that can only be appreciated, never owned. We are this monkey, and the fleeting pleasures of the world are the reflection of the moon. Greed is the futile and exhausting act of trying to grasp the intangible, and it will always, inevitably, end in frustration, The second poison, the polar opposite of greed, is aversion, or dosa. If greed is the act of pulling things toward us, aversion is the act of violently pushing them away. It is the energy of rejection, resistance, and hatred. It is the voice in our mind that insists, "This must go away for me to be happy." Like greed, aversion manifests on a wide spectrum, from the subtlest irritation to the most destructive rage. It begins with the small sparks of everyday life, the impatience we feel while waiting in a long line, the annoyance at a dripping faucet, the frustration when a piece of technology doesn't work as expected. These small aversions, if left unchecked, can easily be fanned into the larger flames of anger and blame. This is the state where we identify an external cause for our discomfort and direct our hostility toward it, the other driver, the incompetent colleague, the unfair politician. We create a narrative in which we are the righteous victim and they are the villainous perpetrator. This feeling can then fester and solidify into the cold, hard stone of hatred and ill will, a deep-seated desire for another person or group to suffer. This is one of a mind's most toxic states, poisoning every thought and coloring the entire world in a dark and threatening light. And crucially, aversion can also be turned inward. When we direct this energy at ourselves, it becomes self-criticism, shame, and self-loathing. We push away our own perceived flaws, we hate our own weaknesses, and we become our own worst enemy, trapped in an inner civil war. Aversion is a poison because it is a futile declaration of war on reality. Life will inevitably present us with unpleasant experience-sickness, loss, criticism, pain. They are an unavoidable part of the human condition. Aversion is the refusal to accept this. It is the act of adding a second, and far more painful, layer of suffering on top of the first. The Buddha famously described this with the analogy of the two arrows. When an arrow strikes you, there is pain. This first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. But if, after being struck by the first arrow, you then become enraged and shoot yourself with a second arrow of "why me? This is terrible. I hate this," the suffering is magnified tenfold. The pain of the second arrow, the arrow of our own mental reaction, is entirely self-inflicted and far more venomous than the first. When we hate something, we give it permission to live in our minds rent-free. The person we resent may be sleeping peacefully, entirely unaware of our feelings, while we lie awake at night, replaying their offenses, stewing in the toxic juices of our own anger. We are drinking the poison and hoping the other person will die. We can visualize aversion as trying to fight our own reflection in a mirror. If the mirror shows us a contorted, angry face, and we respond by punching the mirror, the reflection will not smile. Our fist will be bloodied, the mirror will shatter, and we will be left looking at 1,000 fragmented, distorted, and even more terrifying images of our own rage. Our battle with the reflection only serves to destroy ourselves and our ability to see clearly. We now arrive at the third and most fundamental poison, the root from which both greed and aversion spring. This is ignorance, or moha. This is not ignorance in the sense of being uneducated or lacking information. A person can have multiple PhDs and still be deeply steeped in spiritual ignorance. This is a profound blindness to the true nature of reality. It is the dark, murky water of delusion in which the twin fish of greed and aversion swim. It is the state of not seeing things as they truly are. Ignorance is the master poison because if we saw reality clearly, greed and aversion would have no ground to stand on. They are reactions based entirely on a series of fundamental misperceptions. The first of these is the failure to see the truth of impermanence, anicca. Deep down, we operate under the delusion that things are, or should be, solid, stable, and lasting. This delusion fuels our greed, making us cling to pleasant experiences as if we could make them permanent. It also fuels our aversion, as we are shocked and offended when things inevitably change or decay. We fight against the natural flow of life, like someone trying to stop a river from flowing to the sea. The second misperception is the failure to see the inherent unsatisfactoriness of clinging to impermanent things, dukkha. This is the delusion that true, lasting, ultimate happiness can be found in the objects of our desire. We chase one pleasure after another, one achievement after another, convinced that the next one will finally deliver the perfect satisfaction we seek. Ignorance is what prevents us from seeing the futility of this search, from realizing that building our happiness on a foundation of fleeting phenomena is like building a house on a sand dune. But the deepest, most subtle, and most powerful form of ignorance is the failure to see the truth of no self, or anatta. This is the core delusion upon which our entire sense of identity is built. It is the unquestioned bedrock belief that within our body and mind there resides a solid, separate, continuous, and independent me. We believe there is a permanent CEO in the headquarters of our head, a thinker behind the thoughts, a feeler behind the feelings. This imagined I is the protagonist of our life story. It is this I that feels the need to protect itself by pushing away threats, aversion. It is this I that feels a sense of lack and tries to enhance itself by pulling in possessions, status, and pleasure. Greed. The entire drama of pushing and pulling is predicated on the existence of this central character. The wisdom of Buddhism reveals that when we look closely for this solid, separate self, it cannot be found. What we call the self is actually a dynamic, interdependent, and constantly changing process of physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. It is more like a flowing river than a solid stone. Ignorance is being completely lost in the movie of our life. We laugh with the hero, we cry at the tragedy, we fear the villain, all the while forgetting that we are the audience sitting in the theater, and that the movie is just an ephemeral display of light and shadow. Wisdom, the antidote to ignorance, is the moment the house lights come on and we see the film, the screen, and the theater for what they are. The three poisons work together in a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. Ignorance of our true nature creates the illusion of a separate, needy self. This self, in its quest for security and happiness, engages in the futile strategies of greed and aversion. These actions of pushing and pulling create karmic seeds, which then ripen into the painful and frustrating loops that constitute our suffering. This suffering, in turn, reinforces our belief that the world is a threatening place and that we are a vulnerable self in need of protection, thus deepening our original ignorance. This is the wheel of samsara, spun by the unholy trinity of greed, aversion, and ignorance. The entire spiritual path, the entire project of polishing the mirror, is nothing less than the systematic application of antidotes to these three poisons: the cultivation of generosity to counteract greed, the cultivation of loving kindness to counteract aversion, and the cultivation of wisdom to counteract ignorance. The ghost of more, attachment, and the modern world. Having identified the three root poisons that fuel our karmic loops, we will now take a deeper, more focused look at the first of these toxins, the one that has become the very anthem of our modern age: greed, or in its broader, more personal form, attachment. If greed is the abstract desire, attachment, or upadana, in the Pali language, is the act of clinging, of grasping, of wrapping our sense of identity and well-being so tightly around an object, a person, an idea, or a feeling that we believe we cannot survive without it. It is the haunting whisper that follows us through our days, the ghost of more. It is a phantom that tells us we are fundamentally incomplete, that the life we have is not enough, and that true, lasting happiness lies just over the horizon, available only after one more promotion, one more purchase, one more relationship, one more achievement. While this poison is as ancient as the human mind itself, its manifestation in our hyper-commercialized, digitally saturated, and relentlessly competitive world has become so pervasive, so sophisticated, and so normalized that we often fail to recognize it as a poison at all. We have come to see it as ambition, as aspiration, as the very engine of progress, all the while failing to notice the deep and pervasive anxiety it leaves in its wake. Our modern world is an architecture of attachment. Its structures are designed with breathtaking precision to stimulate, nurture, and exploit this fundamental human vulnerability. The most obvious and powerful of these is the culture of consumerism. The primary function of advertising is not simply to inform us about products, but to manufacture desire itself. It operates by first creating a problem, by subtly convincing you that you are lacking something. Your skin is not smooth enough, your car is not prestigious enough, your life is not exciting enough. And then, it presents its product as the magical solution. It is a system built not for our satisfaction, but for its own perpetuation. The goal is to ensure that the moment one desire is met, another one is already waiting to take its place, keeping us on a perpetual treadmill of wanting. This upgrade mentality has bled out from our purchasing habits into the very fabric of our lives. We feel a constant pressure to upgrade our careers, to optimize our bodies, to curate a more impressive lifestyle, to present a more successful version of ourselves online. We live with a baseline of comparison and inadequacy, a nagging feeling that we are falling behind an ever-receding benchmark of success. Underlying all of this is a deep attachment to wealth and possessions as a source of ultimate security. We accumulate money and things under the delusion that they can build a fortress against the inevitable sufferings of life. We believe a large enough retirement fund can shield us from sickness, a secure house can protect us from loss, and a successful career can save us from the sting of mortality. This is a profound misunderstanding. The mirror of life will eventually reflect sickness, old age, and death to everyone, regardless of their net worth. Our attachment to these worldly defenses only ensures that when the inevitable storms of life do arrive, our suffering will be magnified by the terror of losing the very things we thought would keep us safe. This poison of attachment has found fertile new ground in our digital age, extending far beyond the realm of physical objects. We have developed a powerful attachment to information. For many of us, the first act upon waking is to reach for our phone, to check the news, to scroll through social media feeds, to clear our email inboxes. This is driven by a fear of missing out, a form of attachment to being constantly connected, informed, and relevant. Our minds, which naturally incline towards stillness, become agitated and fragmented by this relentless torrent of data that we feel we need to consume, leaving us feeling anxious and perpetually distracted. An even more insidious form of modern attachment is our clinging to identity and opinions. In a world that feels increasingly polarized and uncertain, we grasp fiercely onto our labels as a source of stability and belonging. Our political party, our nationality, our social ideologies, our professional titles. We fuse our sense of self with our beliefs, and as a result, any challenge to our opinions is perceived as a direct threat to our very existence. This turns every conversation into a potential battlefield, every disagreement into a fight for survival. It makes true listening impossible and deepens the chasms of division that scar our society. Furthermore, we have become deeply attached to the idea of productivity. We wear our busyness as a badge of honor. Our calendars are filled, our schedules are optimized, and we feel a sense of guilt and anxiety in any moment of unscheduled rest. We have become attached to the identity of a productive person, and so even leisure must be made productive, to be scheduled, to be documented, to be displayed as part of a successful life. We have forgotten how to simply be. The reason attachment is labeled a poison is because of the unavoidable suffering it creates. The mechanism is simple yet inescapable. The fundamental, non-negotiable law of existence is impermanence. Everything changes. Our bodies age, our possessions break, our relationships evolve, our feelings shift from one moment to the next. The world is a river, not a rock. Attachment is the futile and painful act of trying to build a permanent dam in the middle of this flowing river. It pits our desires against the fundamental nature of reality, and this is a battle we can never win. The suffering generated by this conflict comes in two distinct forms. First, there is the pain of pursuit. This is the constant, low-grade stress of striving for what we don't have. It is the anxiety of competition, the exhaustion of endless effort, the corrosive feeling of inadequacy when we compare our lives to the curated images of others. We live in a future-oriented state, perpetually deferring our happiness until we acquire the next thing, unable to find peace in the life that is already here. Second, there is the pain of loss. Since everything we cling to is impermanent, we are guaranteed to lose it. The stronger our grasp, the more painful the tearing away will be. When a relationship ends, when a treasured object is broken, when our health fails, the intensity of our grief is directly proportional to the intensity of our prior attachment. It is crucial to understand that the object itself is not the source of our suffering. It is our clinging to it, our mistaken belief that it was ours to keep forever, that transforms the simple fact of change into a devastating emotional trauma. There is a timeless story that illustrates this principle perfectly. A very wealthy merchant possessed everything a person could desire: great ships that sailed the seas, sprawling properties, and storerooms filled with gold and jewels. Yet, every night, he lay in his luxurious bed, unable to sleep. His mind was a storm of anxieties. He worried about his ship sinking in a typhoon, about thieves tunneling into his treasury, about market fluctuations that could diminish his fortune. He was a prisoner in a gilded cage, tormented by the fear of losing all that he had accumulated. In the same town, there lived a beggar who had nothing but a thin, ragged blanket. Each night, he would find a quiet doorway, curl up, and fall into a deep and peaceful sleep. One day, a friend asked the beggar, "How can you sleep so soundly with so little?" The beggar replied, "Because I have nothing to lose. My mind is not burdened by the fears of tomorrow. It is free." This story reveals a profound truth. The merchant's suffering was not caused by his wealth. It was caused by his attachment to his wealth. The beggar's peace came not from his poverty, but from his non-attachment. He was free because he was not chained to his possessions by the fear of their loss. This does not mean the only path to peace is to renounce all worldly things and become a beggar. The true antidote to attachment is not necessarily external renunciation, but internal transformation. It is the conscious cultivation of contentment, or santuti. Contentment is not a passive resignation to one's fate. It is an active and joyful skill. It is the practice of shifting our attention from what is missing to the vast abundance that is already present. It is the simple appreciation of a morning cup of tea, the warmth of the sun, the presence of a friend. It is the discovery that the richest life is not the one with the most possessions, but the one with the fewest wants. A powerful practice to directly weaken the muscle of attachment is the cultivation of generosity, or dana. The act of clinging is like a clenched fist, tight and defensive. The act of giving is an open hand. When we give freely, without expecting anything in return, whether it is our money, our time, or our undivided attention, we are actively training our minds to let go. We are demonstrating to ourselves that our well-being is not dependent on accumulation, but can actually be enhanced by release. The ghost of more is a phantom created by our own mind. We chain ourselves with the very things we seek for our security. Real freedom is not found in finally getting everything we want. It is found in the liberating realization that we do not need it. Having explored the suffering that comes from frantically pulling the world towards us, we must now turn to its dark twin, the suffering that arises when we try to violently push it away. The fire of aversion, pushing away the unwanted reflection. If the poison of attachment is the desperate, futile attempt to pull all pleasant experiences toward us and hold them forever, then its dark twin, the second great poison of the mind, is aversion, known in the Pali language as dosa. Aversion is the equal and opposite error. It is the violent, energetic impulse to push away, to reject, and to annihilate anything we perceive as unpleasant. It is the mind's visceral, full-bodied number. It is a declaration of war on reality, when reality fails to conform to our desires. While we often associate it with its most dramatic expression, rage, aversion is a fire that burns at many different levels of intensity. It can be the subtle, smoldering ember of irritation, the flickering flame of judgment, or the all-consuming inferno of hatred. But in all its forms, its function is the same. It is a poison that burns the one who holds it, a fire that provides the illusion of power while consuming us from within. It is the painful, exhausting act of fighting with the reflections that appear in the great mirror of life. In our daily existence, we are accosted by the sparks of aversion hundreds of times. It is the low-grade irritation that arises when the internet is slow, when you are trying to focus and a dog starts barking, when you are late and get stuck at every single red light. These small moments of friction, of reality not bending to our will, create tiny flashes of mental heat. In themselves, they are minor, but when left unchecked, these embers provide the perfect kindling for larger fires. When irritation finds a target to blame, it blossoms into anger. Consider the common experience of road rage. Another driver makes a mistake and cuts you off. This is the initial event, the first arrow, the immediate surge of adrenaline and anger that follows, the tightening in your chest, the stream of insults you unleash in the privacy of your karthas is the second arrow. You have taken a neutral, unpleasant event and, through the poison of aversion, transformed it into a dramatic personal offense. You create a story about the other driver, casting them as a villain, which serves to justify the toxic fire of your own anger. A more subtle, intellectual form of aversion is the habit of judgment and criticism. It is the mind that is constantly scanning the world for flaws, the fault in a colleague's work, the defect in a partner's character, the imperfection in a meal. Most painfully, this critical eye is often turned inward, becoming the incessant voice of the inner critic, that part of us that constantly pushes away our own perceived weaknesses and mistakes, ensuring we are never good enough. When this fire is fed over a long period, it can solidify into the cold, dense state of hatred or ill will. This is more than just a fleeting, emotional reaction. It is a chronic condition of the heart, a sustained wish for another person to suffer. To live with hatred is to live in a self-made prison, where the bars are forged from our own resentment and the world outside is seen only through a dark haze of bitterness. The mechanism that makes aversion such a potent poison is a deep and painful paradox. What we resist persists. When you actively hate a person or a situation, you are forced to give it your most precious resource, your attention. You must hold it in your mind, replay the associated events, and energize it with the power of your emotions. The person you despise maybe hundreds of miles away, enjoying their life, completely oblivious to your turmoil. Yet, in your mind, they are a constant and powerful presence. You have given them control over your inner peace. You have chained yourself to the very thing you wish to destroy. This is the profound wisdom behind the Buddha's teaching of the two arrows. The first arrow represents the inevitable pains of life. We will all experience sickness, loss, disappointment, and the criticism of others. These arrows are part of the territory of being human. They are, to a large extent, unavoidable. The true source of our deepest suffering, however, is the second arrow, the one we shoot into ourselves immediately after the first one has struck. The second arrow is our reaction. It is our aversion to the pain. It is the thought, this shouldn't be happening. It is the anger, the self-pity, the resentment, the blame. The initial pain of the first arrow might be sharp but brief. The pain of the second arrow, the one powered by our own aversion, can last for days, years, or even a lifetime. The entire spiritual practice is not about building an armor that is impervious to the first arrow. It is about developing the wisdom and mindfulness to stop shooting ourselves with the second. Aversion is a war against what is, and since what is has already occurred, it is a war that is, by definition, unwinnable. It is as futile as standing in a storm and shouting at the rain to stop. The rain is indifferent to your rage. The only person affected by your outburst is you. There is a powerful story from the life of the Buddha that perfectly illustrates the skillful way to meet the fire of aversion. One day, while the Buddha was teaching a crowd, a man who held a deep animosity towards him pushed his way to the front. He began to shout, hurling insults and accusations, trying his best to humiliate the Buddha in front of his followers. The Buddha's disciples grew tense and angry, ready to defend their teacher and silence the man. The Buddha, however, remained perfectly serene. He sat in silence, with a calm and compassionate posture, simply allowing the man to vent his rage. When the man finally ran out of insults, exhausted by his own fury, a quiet stillness fell over the crowd. The Buddha then turned to him and asked a gentle question. "My friend," he said, "if you buy a gift for someone, and that person does not accept your gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, caught off guard by the unexpected question, thought for a moment and replied, "Well, it would still belong to me, the one who offered it." The Buddha nodded and smiled softly. "Exactly so," he said. "Today, you have offered me the gift of your anger and your insults. I do not accept it." This simple response reveals a liberation that is available to all of us. When others project their negativity, their anger, their hatred, we are not obligated to receive it. Aversion is the act of reaching out and catching the hot coal that someone has thrown at us. It is the automatic reaction of taking their poison and making it our own. The path of wisdom is to recognize the gift for what it is and to simply and calmly decline to accept it. The anger belongs to the one who generates it, unless we make the choice to take it on. For many of us in the modern world, the most relentless and painful form of aversion is the one we direct at ourselves. We hate our anxiety, we despise our weaknesses, we are angry at our past failures. We look in the mirror and feel aversion for the body we see. This internal war is the most exhausting of all, because there is nowhere to run. We are trapped in a battle with ourselves. The antidote to this inner fire is the practice of self-compassion, of learning to offer ourselves the same kindness and understanding we would offer a dear friend who was suffering. The direct antidote to the poison of aversion, both internal and external, is the cultivation of metta, or loving kindness. This is the radical and intentional practice of wishing well for ourselves and for all beings. It is not a sentimental feeling or a condoning of harmful behavior. It is a strategic shift of the heart. It is the conscious decision to pour the cool water of goodwill onto the hot flames of anger. It is the realization that while hatred constricts and suffocates, kindness expands and liberates. Even a single moment of genuine goodwill begins to cool the fire and create a space for healing. Having looked at the fire of aversion, the frantic energy of pushing the world away, we are left with a final, searching question. If attachment is the act of pulling and aversion is the act of pushing, what is the core blindness that makes us believe that this constant, exhausting struggle is a sensible way to live? What is the foundational darkness that obscures our view of the mirror and of ourselves, compelling us to fight with our own reflection? This brings us to the very root of the three poisons, the most subtle and pervasive of them all, the great delusion of ignorance, the foundational ignorance. Believing the reflection is real, we have explored the poison of greed, the desperate pulling toward us of what we desire, and the poison of aversion, the violent pushing away of what we dislike. We have seen how this constant, exhausting struggle of pushing and pulling fuels the karmic loops that trap us. Now, we must journey deeper to the very source of these two poisons, to the foundational error from which all other suffering grows. This is the third and most fundamental poison, ignorance. In the Buddhist tradition, this is called moha or avijja, and it does not mean a lack of worldly knowledge or a low intellect. A brilliant scientist or a celebrated historian can be utterly lost in the depths of spiritual ignorance. This is a blindness of the heart, a profound misperception of the nature of reality itself. It is the darkness that allows us to mistake a rope for a snake, leading to the fear and aversion of pushing it away. It is the darkness that allows us to mistake a shard of glass for a flawless diamond, leading to the greed and attachment of wanting to possess it. Greed and aversion are the reactions, but ignorance is the context that makes those reactions seem sensible. It is the flawed operating system running in the background of our minds, and until we see it and correct it, we are destined to keep generating the same errors, the same suffering, the same painful reflections in the mirror of our lives. The first and most immediate aspect of reality that ignorance obscures is the truth of impermanence, or anicca. Our minds, in their search for safety and security, have a deep-seated tendency to perceive the world as a collection of solid, static, and enduring things. We see our body, our house, our career, our relationships as fixed entities, as nouns. We operate under the tacit assumption that things will, for the most part, stay the same. Yet, the unyielding truth of existence is that everything, without exception, is in a state of constant and dynamic flux. Nothing is static. Our bodies are not solid objects, but a flowing process of billions of cells constantly dying and being reborn. Our thoughts and feelings are a cascading river, with no single thought or feeling lasting for more than a few moments. Our relationships, our societies, the very planet we live on, are all engaged in an endless dance of change. Everything is a process, a verb, not a noun. Ignorance is the act of denying this flow. It is this denial that directly fuels greed and aversion. We cling desperately to pleasant moments, people, and possessions, greed, because we are under the delusion that we can freeze them in time and make them permanent. We are then shocked, offended, and angered, aversion, when they inevitably change, decay, or leave us. All of this struggle is born from a single, fundamental argument with reality. We are demanding permanence from a universe whose very nature is impermanence. It is a recipe for guaranteed frustration. The second truth obscured by ignorance is the nature of dukkha. This Pali word is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is more subtle and pervasive. It does not just refer to the obvious pains of sickness, grief, or physical injury. It points to the underlying, persistent quality of unsatisfactoriness, stress, and friction that arises from relying on impermanent things for our lasting happiness. Imagine trying to quench a deep thirst by drinking from a cup that is full of tiny leaks. You can pour the most delicious, refreshing water, a new relationship, a promotion at work, a wonderful vacation into the cup. For a moment, you feel satisfaction, but because the cup is leaky, the water inevitably drains away, and soon you are thirsty again, needing to find more water to pour into the cup. Ignorance is the state of being so focused on finding more water that you never stop to examine the nature of the cup itself. Dukkha is the inherent leakiness of any happiness that is dependent on fleeting conditions. Our entire consumer culture is built upon exploiting our ignorance of dukkha. It promises that if we just find the right kind of water, the right product, the right experience, we can finally plug the leaks and be permanently satisfied. But the wisdom of this teaching reveals that the problem is not with the water, it is with the cup. As long as we seek our ultimate fulfillment in things that are by nature impermanent, we are condemned to a life of seeking but never truly finding. This brings us to the deepest and most challenging aspect of ignorance, the very linchpin of our delusion. This is the failure to see the truth of no self, or anatta. This is the core belief, so intuitive and so deeply ingrained that we never think to question it, that somewhere inside this body and mind there lives a permanent, independent, and continuous I. We believe there is a thinker behind our thoughts, a feeler who feels our emotions, a CEO in the control room of the mind who is the owner of our life and the author of our actions. It is this solid, separate self that ignorance conjures into being. It is this self that feels lacking and therefore grasps with greed. It is this self that feels threatened and therefore pushes away with aversion. The entire game of pushing and pulling, the entire drama of our lives, is built around this central protagonist. But the revolutionary insight of the Buddha was that when we look for this solid, separate self, it simply cannot be found. What we call ourself is, in fact, a dynamic and interdependent process, a flowing constellation of 5 components: our physical body, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental formations like thoughts and intentions, and our consciousness. There is no separate you that has feelings. There is only the process of feeling. There is no separate you that thinks. There is only the process of thinking. The self is a verb, masquerading as a noun. A famous Buddhist text recounts a dialogue between a sage named Nagasena and the Greek king Melinda that brilliantly illustrates this point. The king arrives in a chariot and asks Nagasena his name. Nagasena replies that Nagasena is just a convenient designation, but that no permanent person can be found. The king, a sharp debater, is amused and challenges him. He asks, "Venerable sir, if there is no person, then who is it that wears these robes and takes this food?" He then points to the chariot. "Is the chariot the wheels?" "No, your majesty," Nagasena replies. "Is it the axle, the frame, the reins?" The king answers no to each question. Nagasena then asks, "Is the chariot, then, all of these parts combined?" The king agrees. Nagasena's final point is devastatingly simple. "Your majesty, you have said that chariot is just a convenient name given to a collection of parts, arranged in a specific way. It has no independent essence of its own." The king concedes the point. Nagasena then concludes, "Just so, your majesty, Nagasena is a convenient designation for the collection of the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. But in an ultimate sense, no permanent, separate person is to be found. Realizing this truth of no self is what ultimately collapses the entire structure of suffering. If there is no solid, separate self to protect and enhance, the motivations for greed and aversion lose their foundation. Who is there to be greedy? Who is there to feel hatred? The game simply stops. We can think of this entire process using the analogy of being lost in a movie. Ignorance is the darkness of the theater that allows us to forget where we are and to believe that the story on the screen is real. Because we are ignorant, we become attached to the hero, wanting good things to happen to him, greed, and we feel aversion for the villain, wanting him to be defeated, aversion. We completely forget that the entire film is just an ephemeral play of light and shadow, constantly changing from one moment to the next. Impermanence. We forget that the film is a drama designed to create tension and release, and that it can never provide lasting peace, dukkha. And most importantly, we forget that we are not the character on the screen. We are the audience watching the show. No, self. Wisdom is the simple, radical act of remembering who and where we are. It is the moment the lights come on. This foundational ignorance is, therefore, the ultimate misreading of the reflection in the mirror. We believe the reflection is a solid, independent reality, and we believe we are a solid, independent self looking at it. This fundamental error is what creates the division, the conflict, and the struggle. To see things clearly is to realize that the watcher and the reflection are both part of the same unfolding, ownerless process. Understanding how this ignorance operates is the first step. The next is to see how this flawed view of reality becomes so deeply ingrained in us that it hardens into the automatic, unconscious habits that dictate our lives. The grooves of habit, how karmic patterns shape our reality. We have journeyed to the deepest root of our suffering, uncovering the foundational ignorance that misperceives reality and gives rise to the poisons of greed and aversion. But an ideology, even a flawed one, is just an abstract blueprint. For it to shape our world, it must be translated into action. This is where the force of habit comes into play. If ignorance is the faulty design, our habitual tendencies are the automatic, unconscious ways we build our lives according to that design. In the Buddhist teachings, these deep-seated patterns are known as sankhara, a term that can be translated as mental formations or volitional formations. They are the karmic grooves carved into our consciousness by a lifetime of repeated thoughts, emotions, and reaction. They are more than just surface-level habits like biting your nails or taking the same route to work. They are the very architecture of our personality, the default settings of our mind, the powerful undercurrents that pull us in certain directions before we have even made a conscious choice. Understanding these grooves is essential, for they explain why we feel so stuck, and they reveal both the great challenge and the profound possibility of true transformation. Perhaps the most powerful way to visualize the creation of these habitual tendencies is to imagine the mind as a vast, flat field of soft earth. When we are very young, the field is relatively smooth. The first time it rains, the first time we have a particular experience, the water of our mental energy flows across it in a somewhat random way. But let's say that in response to a feeling of frustration, a child throws a tantrum and discovers that this action gets them the attention they crave. This reaction creates a tiny, shallow channel in the soft earth of the mind. The next time a similar feeling of frustration arises, the water of their mental energy will find it slightly easier to flow down this pre-existing channel than to carve a new one. The path of least resistance has been established. Each time the reaction is repeated, the channel gets a little wider and a little deeper. After years of the same automatic response to frustration, perhaps now expressed as a sharp word, a slammed door, or a bout of silent resentment, that tiny channel has become a deep and mighty riverbed. Now, when the rains of frustration come, the energy of the mind doesn't just prefer this channel. It rushes into it automatically, with immense force and momentum. Our most ingrained adult reactions, the immediate flash of anger when criticized, the default to anxiety when facing uncertainty, the compulsive need to please others, are these deep riverbeds. They are not conscious choices in the moment. They are powerful, conditioned reflexes, carved into the landscape of our being by countless past actions. This ancient Buddhist insight is remarkably validated by the findings of modern neuroscience. When we think a thought or perform an action, a specific set of neurons fire in our brain. The more frequently we repeat that thought or action, the stronger the connection between those neurons becomes. The brain reinforces these connections, making the transmission of that particular signal more efficient. The popular phrase, "neurons that fire together, wire together," is a perfect contemporary description of sankhara. We can also think of this as creating paths in a dense forest. The very first time you try to walk from one point to another, it is incredibly difficult. You have to push branches out of the way, navigate thorny bushes, and expend a great deal of conscious effort. But if you walk that same path the next day, it is slightly easier. After a week of walking it, a faint trail begins to appear. After a year, it is a clear, well-trodden path. After 20 years, it might be a wide, paved road, a mental superhighway. Our most common thought patterns, our worries, our self-criticisms, our judgments are these superhighways. They are effortless to travel down. This is why change is so challenging. When we try to cultivate a new, more positive habit of mind, such as gratitude, it feels awkward and difficult at first. We are trying to forge a new path through the dense, untouched undergrowth of the forest, while the old, familiar superhighway of negativity is right there, inviting and easy. It takes conscious, sustained effort to resist the pull of the old groove and to begin wearing down a new one. To begin freeing ourselves from these patterns, we must first learn to recognize them in our own experience. These sankharas are often so close to us that we mistake them for our core identity. We say, "I am an anxious person," rather than, "I have a deeply ingrained habit of anxious thinking." Becoming aware of these patterns is the first step to realizing they are not us, but are simply old programs that can be updated. Some common patterns include the avoider, whose automatic response to any conflict or difficulty is to withdraw, procrastinate, or seek distraction. There is the fixer, or the people pleaser, whose default reaction to another's pain is to immediately try to solve it, often neglecting their own needs in the process. There is the inner critic, the deeply grooved habit of meeting any personal mistake with a torrent of harsh self-judgment. And there is the worrier, the mind that has been conditioned to constantly scan the horizon for potential threats, a mind for whom catastrophizing is its default mode of operating. Recognizing our dominant patterns without judgment is an act of profound self-compassion. It is like discovering we have been walking with a limp for our entire life. The discovery doesn't mean we are broken. It simply means we can now begin the work of learning to walk with balance. These habitual grooves are not just inner phenomena. They actively shape the external reality we perceive. They are the primary filters through which we experience the world, the smudges and distortions on the mirror's surface. If a person has a strong and deep groove of insecurity, their mind will be conditioned to interpret neutral events through that filter. A simple question from their boss like, "Is that report finished yet?" might be immediately perceived as a criticism, a sign of their incompetence. The mirror of their life will constantly reflect back a world that seems critical and judgmental, not because the world is inherently so, but because their own habitual filter is designed to highlight and magnify any potential evidence that confirms their insecurity. Likewise, a person with a deep groove of suspicion will live in a world that seems to be filled with untrustworthy people. They will interpret acts of kindness as attempts at manipulation. Our reality is not just the sum of our individual actions, but the result of the immense, accumulated momentum of our deepest patterns. We live inside the houses that our habits have built. This understanding could easily lead to despair, to the feeling that we are hopelessly programmed by our past. But the truth is the exact opposite. It is the very source of our hope. For if we are the ones who, through our own repeated actions, carved these grooves into our minds, then we are also the ones who have the power to carve new ones. This is not easy work. It is the work of a lifetime. The first and most essential tool is mindfulness, the simple, non-judgmental awareness of our own mind. Mindfulness is the act of stepping back and watching the water of our mental energy flow. When we can see it beginning to rush into the old riverbed of anger, we have a precious, momentary gap of space of choice. In that space, we can apply conscious effort to redirect the flow, even just a little. When we choose to respond to a stressful situation with a single, conscious breath instead of our usual panic, we are digging a new, tiny channel. When we respond to self-criticism with a moment of self-compassion, we are sending a trickle of water down a new path. It will feel unnatural at first, but every single time we choose a new, more skillful response, we deepen the new groove. With patience, with diligence, and with great compassion for ourselves, we can, over time, carve new riverbeds of kindness, wisdom, and peace into our consciousness. We can literally rewire our minds. We are not merely the products of our history. We have the capacity to become the conscious creators of our destiny. This marks a pivotal moment in our journey. For 10 sections, we have sat in the dark, courageously examining the intricate anatomy of our suffering. We have looked at the law of cause and effect, the creative power of the mind, the poisons that distort it, and the habits that enslave it. Now, having diagnosed the illness, it is time to turn our full attention to the cure. It is time to explore the practical, transformative tools that allow us to polish the mirror and heal the mind. The very first, the most foundational, and the most indispensable of these tools is the simple, radical act of paying attention. The act of polishing. Mindfulness as the foundational tool. For the past 10 chapters of our journey together, we have engaged in a courageous and sometimes difficult exploration. We have sat in the dark, metaphorically speaking, to understand the intricate anatomy of our own suffering. We have examined the immutable law of cause and effect, witnessed the creative and often deceptive power of the mind, dissected the 3 poisons that fuel our discontent, and traced the deep grooves of habit that keep us locked in repetitive cycles. This diagnostic work is essential, but diagnosis alone is not a cure. Now, we arrive at a pivotal turning point. We move from understanding the problem to engaging with the solution. We shift from examining the smudges, stains, and distortions on the mirror of life to picking up the very first and most essential tool for cleaning it. This tool is not complex, it is not exotic, and it requires no special belief system. It is a fundamental, innate human capacity that, for many of us, has simply been forgotten, neglected, and buried under the relentless noise of modern life. This tool is called mindfulness. In the ancient Pali language, the word is sati, which carries a meaning of remembering, of bearing in mind, of bringing back a wandering attention. It is the simple, yet radical, act of waking up from the dream of our incessant thinking and arriving fully in the one and only moment we ever truly have, the present moment. Mindfulness is the soft, durable cloth we will now use to begin, gently and patiently, to polish the mirror. So, what is mindfulness? In its most widely used contemporary definition, mindfulness is the practice of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack each part of this profound and practical instruction, for within it lies the entire key to its power. First, paying attention. This is not a passive or vacant state. It is an active, engaged direction of our consciousness. We are choosing to place our attention somewhere, rather than letting it be hijacked by every random thought, external distraction, or emotional impulse. It is an act of reclaiming our most valuable resource. Second, on purpose. Our attention is not just active, it is intentional. We have a reason for paying attention, to see clearly, to understand the workings of our own mind, to wake up from the trance of our conditioning. This sense of purpose distinguishes mindfulness from simple daydreaming or aimless noticing. Third, in the present moment. This is perhaps the most radical component. Our minds are natural time travelers. They spend the vast majority of their energy ruminating on the pace-replaying regrets, nursing grievances, basking in old gloria, projecting into the future, rehearsing anxieties, planning strategies, fantasizing about outcomes. Mindfulness is the gentle but firm act of withdrawing our energy from these imaginary realms and grounding it in the solid reality of the here and now. The feel of the air on our skin, the sound of a passing car, the sensation of our own breathing. Why is this so crucial? Because the present moment is the only place where life is actually happening. The past is a memory. The future is a fantasy. The only point where we have any real power to choose, to act, to experience, is right now. The final component is the most challenging and arguably the most transformative, non-judgmentally. This means cultivating an attitude of impartial, compassionate curiosity toward our own experience. It is the attitude of a kind scientist, observing a natural phenomenon. When a thought of anger arises, instead of judging it as bad or I shouldn't be angry, the mindful approach is to simply note, with a gentle interest, the feeling of anger is present. There is heat in the chest, a tightening in the jaw. This is what anger feels like. When the mind wanders during practice for the 100th time, instead of judging ourselves as a bad meditator, we simply note, the mind has wandered, and then gently guide it back. This non-judgmental quality is the direct antidote to the second arrow. It allows the raw experiences of life, the first arrows to arise and pass away without being compounded by the second, self-inflicted arrows of guilt, shame, and resistance. It is in this non-judgmental acceptance that true healing begins. This practical, psychological understanding of mindfulness is vital because it helps to dispel some common and unhelpful myths. The first myth is that mindfulness is about stopping or clearing your thoughts. This is not the goal, nor is it possible. The mind produces thoughts as the heart produces beats. The goal of mindfulness is not to stop the river of thought, but to change your relationship to it. It is the shift from being swept away in the current of the river to sitting peacefully on the riverbank, watching the thoughts, feelings, and sensations float by without having to jump in and be carried away by them. The second myth is that mindfulness is merely a relaxation technique. While a deep sense of calm is often a wonderful side effect of the practice, it is not the primary purpose. The purpose is clarity, wisdom, and insight. Sometimes, being mindful means becoming acutely aware of very uncomfortable feelings like grief or fear. The practice gives us the stability to be with these feelings without being overwhelmed, but it does not promise a life free of discomfort. It promises a life where we can meet discomfort with wisdom and grace. The most potent effect of mindfulness is its ability to create space. For most of our lives, we operate on a hair trigger of stimulus and response. An event happens, and our ingrained karmic habits react instantly without our conscious permission. Someone cuts us off in traffic, stimulus, and the river of our mind flows instantly down the deep groove of anger, response. We receive an unexpected bill, stimulus, and we are immediately swept away by the current of anxiety, response. This is the essence of the karmic loop. Mindfulness is the miraculous insertion of a pause, a sacred gap between the stimulus and the response. In that space, freedom is born. Let us revisit the traffic scenario. You are driving, and another car swerves dangerously in front of you. The stimulus is clear. The mindful response would be to notice, in real time, the cascade of events within your own body and mind. You would notice the jolt of adrenaline, the sudden heat in your face, the clenching of your hands on the steering wheel. You would notice the thought arising, "That idiot, I'll teach them a lesson." Because you are noticing these things as they happen, instead of being completely identified with them, a space opens up. In that space, you have a choice. You can still choose to follow the old habit of anger, but now it is a conscious choice, not an unconscious compulsion. Or you can choose to take a breath, to recognize the other driver's action as a product of their own stress or inattention, and to let it go, preserving your own inner peace. This space is the difference between being a prisoner of your past and the creator of your future. It is the moment the light comes on in the dark room of the mind. Before mindfulness, we are stumbling around in the darkness, constantly bumping into the sharp-cornered furniture of our old habits and fears. Mindfulness is the simple act of flipping the switch. Suddenly, we can see the layout of the room clearly. We see the chair of sadness, the table of anxiety, the old trunk of childhood grief. We don't have to immediately get rid of all the furniture. The simple act of seeing it for what it is, in the clear light of awareness, is what begins to transform everything. There is a Zen story that speaks to the essence of this practice. A great acrobat was preparing to walk a tightrope stretched high above a town square. He turned to his young apprentice and said, "Now listen, to make sure we are both safe, I will watch out for you, and you will watch out for me." But the apprentice, who was wise, replied, "Master, with all respect, would it not be a better strategy if I were to watch out for myself, and you were to watch out for yourself? In this way, I am certain we will both be safe." This is not a story about selfishness. It is a story about the radical responsibility and total presence that mindfulness demands. To stay balanced on the tightrope of life, the acrobat cannot afford to be distracted. He cannot be thinking about the step he just took, the past, or worrying about reaching the platform at the other end, the future. He must be completely and utterly present with the feeling of the rope beneath his foot, the tension in his muscles, the rhythm of his own breath. In this moment, and this moment, and this moment, his survival depends on his unwavering mindfulness. In the same way, our inner balance, our psychological and spiritual well-being, depends on our ability to pay this same quality of close, non-judgmental attention to our own inner state. By watching out for ourselves in this deep way, we naturally watch out for others, because a person grounded in mindful awareness is far less likely to cause harm through unconscious reactivity. So how do we begin this practice, this act of polishing? The beauty of mindfulness is its simplicity and accessibility. It begins with the breath. Find a posture that is comfortable, either sitting on a chair with your feet flat on the floor or on a cushion on the ground. Allow your back to be upright, but not stiff, in a posture of dignity. You can gently close your eyes or let your gaze rest softly a few feet in front of you. Now, Simply bring your attention to the sensation of your own breathing. You don't need to change it, control it, or improve it. Just feel it. You might notice the coolness of the air as it enters your nostrils and the warmth as it leaves. Or you might rest your attention on the gentle rising and falling of your abdomen. Simply rest your awareness on one of these anchor spots. Now, what will happen, guaranteed, is that your mind will wander. A thought about dinner will arise, or a memory from yesterday, or a worry about tomorrow. This is not a mistake. This is simply what minds do. The practice of mindfulness is not about preventing the mind from wandering. The practice occurs in the moment you notice that it has wandered. In that moment of noticing, you have woken up, and then, with the kindness and patience you would show to a small puppy that has wandered off, you gently, without any scolding or judgment, guide your attention back to the sensation of the breath. That return is the core of the practice. Every time you return your attention, you are strengthening the muscle of mindfulness. Each return is a single, gentle wipe of the polishing cloth on the surface of the mirror. From the breath, we can expand our awareness. We can practice mindfulness of the body through a body scan. Lying down or sitting, we can sequentially bring our attention to different parts of the body: the toes, the feet, the legs, the torso, the arms, the head, simply noticing whatever sensations are present. There might be warmth, tingling, pressure, throbbing, or even no sensation at all. The instruction is simply to notice without judgment and then move on. This practice is incredibly grounding. It helps us to reconnect with our physical selves and to inhabit our bodies more fully, rather than living entirely in our heads. We can also practice mindfulness of sounds. Instead of automatically labeling sounds as good like birdsong or bad like a car alarm, we can simply open our awareness and allow all sounds to be pure sensory experiences. We notice how a sound arises in our field of awareness, how it lingers for a moment, and how it dissolves all on its own. This is a direct, experiential lesson in the nature of impermanence. Mindfulness is not something to be confined to a meditation cushion. It is a way of being that we can integrate into every moment. We can be mindful while washing the dishes, feeling the warmth of the water and the texture of the soap. We can be mindful while drinking a cup of tea, noticing its aroma, its color, its warmth. Every moment of our day is an opportunity to wake up. This is the beginning of freedom. It is the foundational skill that makes all other progress on the path possible. It is the gentle, persistent, and loving act of cleaning the lens of our perception so that we may, perhaps for the very first time, begin to see what is truly there. Deep cleaning the mirror, the practice of meditation. Having discovered mindfulness as the fundamental tool for polishing the mirror of our life, the gentle cloth we can use in any given moment to wipe away the dust of distraction, we now turn to a more focused and systematic approach. If mindfulness is the general principle of keeping our home tidy as we go about our day, then formal meditation is the time we intentionally set aside each week for a deep, thorough cleaning. This is the practice of bhavana, a Pali word that means cultivation or development. This name itself is revealing. Meditation, in this tradition, is not a passive state of zoning out or an attempt to escape from reality. It is an active, purposeful engagement with our own minds. It is the dedicated time we spend in our inner gymnasium, training the mind to be more stable, more clear, and more wise. It is the methodical work of transforming the very texture of our consciousness, moving it from a state of agitation and confusion to one of tranquility and profound insight. This cultivation generally develops along two complementary paths, like the two wings of a bird, both of which are essential for flight. The first wing is known as samatha, which translates as tranquility or concentration. The primary goal of samatha meditation is to calm and unify the mind. Our minds, in their untrained state, are often compared to a monkey mind, constantly chattering, agitated, and jumping restlessly from one branch of thought to another. This inner chaos makes it impossible to see anything clearly. A powerful and classic analogy for this practice is that of a jar of muddy water. Imagine our mind is a glass jar filled with water, but a handful of dirt and sediment has been thrown in, and the whole jar has been shaken vigorously. The water is murky, turbulent, and completely opaque. You cannot see through it. If you try to reach in and physically pull the dirt out, you will only stir it up more. The practice of samatha is the simple, yet profound act of setting the jar down on a stable surface and allowing it to be still. You do not fight with the mud. You do not try to force it to settle. You simply create the conditions of stillness, and the mud, obeying the natural law of gravity, slowly and gently settles to the bottom. In meditation, our object of focus most commonly, the physical sensation of the breathers, the stable surface, our turbulent thoughts, emotions, and memories are the mud. By repeatedly, gently, and patiently returning our attention to the breath every time it wanders, we are creating the condition of mental stillness. Over time, the restless energy of the mind subsides, the chatter quiets down, and the muddy thoughts and emotions settle, leaving the water of our consciousness clear, bright, and transparent. This state of calm clarity is not the final goal of the path, but it is an indispensable foundation. You cannot hope to understand the nature of the ocean by studying its stormy, churning surface. You must first allow the waters to become calm so you can see into the depths. Once a degree of calm and stability has been established through samatha, we can then cultivate the second wing of the bird, vipassana, which means insight or clear seeing. If samatha is the act of allowing the muddy water to settle, vipassana is the act of then looking deeply into that clear water to see what is truly there. With the mind now stable and focused, we can use it as a kind of microscope to investigate the true nature of our own experience. This is not an intellectual analysis. It is a direct, non-conceptual observation of reality as it unfolds moment by moment. The objects of our investigation are the three fundamental characteristics of existence we have previously discussed: impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and no self, anatta. We don't just think everything is impermanent. We use our focused attention to watch, in real time, as a thought arises in the mind, exists for a fleeting moment, and then vanishes without a trace. We feel a pleasant sensation in the body, and we watch as it too changes and dissolves. Through this direct observation, the truth of impermanence ceases to be a mere concept and becomes a lived reality. We investigate the nature of ourself. We look for the one who is doing the watching, the permanent I in charge. And what we find is not a solid entity, but a flowing process of seeing, hearing, feeling, and thinking. The direct perception of this empty, process-oriented nature of the self is the insight of anatta. It is this clear seeing, this vipassana, that has the power to cut through the root of ignorance. While samatha can suppress the poisons of greed and aversion, like pressing a rock down on top of some weeds, vipassana is the practice of pulling the weeds out by the very root so they can never grow back. Samatha provides the calm, and vipassana provides the liberation. Let us try a brief formal practice right now, one that combines both of these qualities. Find a comfortable and upright posture, allowing your body to be both relaxed and dignified. Gently close your eyes. For the first few moments, simply practice samatha. Bring your awareness to the feeling of the breath at the tip of the nostrils or at the abdomen. Rest your full, gentle attention on the feeling of the in-breath and the out-breath. When your mind inevitably wanders into thought, just notice this without judgment and kindly guide your attention back to the breath. Do this for a few cycles, gently gathering your scattered attention. Now, let us introduce a taste of Vipassana. While keeping the breath as a gentle anchor, slightly widen the scope of your awareness to include the sounds around you. Notice sounds as they arise in your field of hearing. Don't label them or judge them. Simply notice them as pure vibration, arising and passing away. Notice how a distant sound appears from nowhere, lingers for a moment, and then vanishes. Notice how a nearby sound does the same. See if you can perceive the inherently impermanent, fleeting nature of sound itself. You are not creating it, you are not sustaining it, you are not destroying it. You are simply witnessing the natural, selfless process of hearing. When you feel distracted, you can always return your full attention to the breath, your safe harbor. Then, when you are ready, you can gently open your eyes. This simple exercise provides a glimpse into the profound work of meditation. The transformative power of this practice, its ability to purify even the most deeply stained mind, is perhaps best illustrated by the incredible story of Angulimala. Angulimala, whose name means finger garland, was a feared serial killer who lived in the time of the Buddha. Consumed by a vow made to a malevolent teacher, he had murdered 99 people, cutting off a finger from each victim to wear as a gruesome necklace. He was the embodiment of hatred, violence, and delusion, a force of pure terror. The king had sent armies after him, but none could capture him. One day, the Buddha, aware that Angulimala was on the verge of killing his own mother to complete his garland of 100 fingers, set out alone and unarmed into the forest where the killer lived. Angulimala saw the lone monk and was delighted. Here was an easy, final victim. He drew his sword and began to run after the Buddha. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a calm, normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up to him. Exhausted and bewildered, he screamed out, "Stop, ascetic, stop!" The Buddha, without turning, replied in a clear, steady voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." This enigmatic statement struck Angulimala to the core. "What do you mean you have stopped?" he yelled. "You are still walking." The Buddha turned to face him, his eyes filled not with fear, but with unshakable compassion. "I have stopped," he explained, "because I have laid down the sword. I have stopped creating the causes of suffering for myself and others. You are still running on the endless wheel of violence and retribution. It is you who must stop." In that moment, faced with the Buddha's utter fearlessness and profound wisdom, the entire edifice of Angulimala's rage and delusion shattered. He saw the horrific futility of his life. He threw down his sword, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and begged to be accepted as a monk. Though many were terrified and skeptical, the Buddha accepted him. Through years of diligent and arduous meditation, Angulimala faced the karmic consequences of his past actions and worked tirelessly to cultivate his mind. He sat with the ghosts of his victims, not running from his past, but purifying it through the power of his practice. In time, this former mass murderer completely cleansed the mirror of his consciousness, eradicated the 3 poisons from his heart, and became a fully enlightened saint, an arhat. His story stands as the ultimate testament to the power of bhavana. It proves that no one is beyond redemption. No matter how deep the grooves of negative habit, no matter how profoundly stained the mirror, the human mind contains within it the innate capacity for total purification and liberation. Our past does not have to be our prison. Having seen that the mind can be calmed and clarified through meditation, we must now ask, what is the nature of the reflection we wish to cultivate? With the mud settled and the water clear, what new seeds should we intentionally plant in the purified soil of our consciousness? This brings us to the active generation of wholesome states, beginning with the most powerful antidotes to the darkness of this world: compassion and loving kindness. Changing the reflection. The power of compassion and loving kindness. We have arrived at a vital and beautiful turning point in our work of polishing the mirror. Through the practice of mindfulness, we have learned to hold the polishing cloth, to pay attention to the surface of our experience. Through the formal discipline of meditation, we have learned how to deep clean the mirror, allowing the muddy waters of our mind to settle, revealing a new and hopeful clarity. But a mirror that is merely clean, or a field that is merely plowed, does not guarantee a beautiful reflection or a rich harvest. If a clean field is left unattended, the persistent weeds of our old karmic habits will inevitably begin to grow again. The work of liberation is not just about ceasing to do harm or ceasing to be confused. It is also about the active, joyful, and intentional cultivation of the good. It is time to move from simply cleaning the soil to consciously planting a magnificent garden. We must now learn how to proactively generate the causes of happiness, how to sow seeds of such beauty and power that they will eventually outgrow and transform the weeds of our past conditioning. The first and most essential flowers we must plant in the garden of our heart, the most powerful seeds of light we can offer to the world, are the boundless states of loving kindness and compassion. These are not just fleeting, sentimental emotions. They are profound, trainable skills of the mind, powerful karmic forces that directly counteract the poisons of aversion and cruelty and begin to radically change the reflection we see in the mirror of life. Let us first explore the radiant practice of loving kindness, known in Pali as metta. It is essential to understand what metta is and what it is not. It is not the conditional, preferential love we often feel for a romantic partner or a close friend. It is not a sentimental sweetness that ignores difficulty, and it is certainly not a passive acceptance of harmful behavior. Metta is a universal, unconditional, and impartial goodwill. It is the sincere, heartfelt wish for the well-being and happiness of oneself and all living beings, without exception and without discrimination. The most powerful analogy for metta is the sun in the sky. The sun does not decide who is worthy of its warmth. It shines its light equally on the beautiful flower and the thorny weed, on the kindest saint and the cruelest sinner, on the palace of the king and the hovel of the beggar. It simply radiates its nature, which is warmth and light. The practice of metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness, is the practice of developing a similar sun within our own hearts, a boundless source of warmth that we can learn to radiate in all directions. It is the systematic breaking down of the artificial barriers our minds have created between me and you, between friend and enemy, between us and them. Crucially, this practice must always begin with ourselves. This is not an act of selfishness, it is a recognition of a fundamental truth. We cannot pour from an empty cup. For many of us, particularly those raised in cultures that prize harsh self-criticism, offering kindness to ourselves is the most difficult step. We carry a relentless inner critic that judges our every flaw. To direct phrases of loving kindness towards ourselves, phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe from inner and outer harm, may I live with ease," can feel awkward or even fraudulent at first. But this is the most necessary work. It is the act of applying a healing balm to our own deepest wounds. It is the beginning of the end of our inner war. Only when we have established a baseline of friendship and warmth with ourselves can we genuinely offer it to others. The formal practice of cultivating metta is a beautiful, structured meditation that unfolds in stages, gradually expanding the circle of our goodwill. We begin with ourselves, establishing that foundation of self-compassion. Once a feeling of warmth has been generated, we then bring to mind a benefactor, or a respected teacher, someone for whom it is easy to feel gratitude and love. We bathe them in the light of our metta, repeating the same phrases: may you be happy, may you be healthy. Then, we expand the circle to include a dearly beloved friend or family member, allowing our natural affection to flow freely. The next stage is a crucial one. We bring to mind a neutral person, someone we see often but have no strong feelings about: a cashier at the grocery store, a person we see on our daily commute. By directing our goodwill towards them, we begin to challenge our default state of indifference. We start to see the humanity in everyone, not just those in our inner circle. Then comes the most transformative and challenging stage. We bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict or for whom we feel resentment. The practice here is not to condone their harmful actions or to force ourselves to like them. It is a far more profound act. It is the wise recognition that their harmful actions are driven by their own inner suffering, their own poisons of greed, aversion, and ignorance. From a place of strength and clarity, we practice wishing for them to be free from the very suffering that causes them to create suffering for others. This is the ultimate alchemy, transforming the lead of our resentment into the gold of compassionate understanding. Finally, we break down all barriers completely, radiating the light of metta outward in every direction: front, back, left, right, up, and down, to encompass all living beings everywhere, known and unknown, near and far, wishing for all to be well, happy, and at peace. From the boundless, gentle warmth of metta arises its potent and active counterpart, compassion or karuna. If metta is the sincere wish for all beings to be happy, karuna is the heart's response when we encounter beings who are not happy. It is the tremble of the heart in the presence of suffering. It is not pity, which often contains a subtle sense of superiority, of looking down on another's misfortune. Compassion is empathy in action. It is the ability to feel with another, to recognize our shared vulnerability to pain, and to respond with the heartfelt aspiration: may you be free from this suffering. While metta can be a more peaceful, radiant state, karuna is what spurs us to engage with the world. It is the motivating force behind every act of genuine help, every moment of deep listening, every effort to alleviate the pain of another. It is the heart of the bodhisattva, the enlightened warrior who vows to remain in the world until all beings are liberated from suffering. However, true compassion must be balanced with wisdom. There is a danger known as idiot compassion, which is an empathy untempered by clarity. This is when, in our desire to help, we become overwhelmed by another's pain, lose our own balance, and end up making unskillful choices that may harm ourselves or even the person we are trying to help. True karuna is vast and courageous, but it is also grounded and sustainable. It understands that we cannot carry the suffering of the world on our own shoulders, but we can always offer our presence, our wisdom, and our heartfelt wish for all to be free. The practice of cultivating compassion involves bringing to mind a being we know is suffering, allowing our heart to connect with their pain without drowning in it, and then sincerely, powerfully radiating the wish for their suffering and its causes to cease. The supreme power of these qualities, their ability to remain unshaken even in the face of the most intense hostility, is perfectly exemplified in the story of the Buddha and his cousin, Devadatta. From the very beginning, Devadatta was consumed by a venomous jealousy of the Buddha's wisdom and influence. He dedicated his life to destroying his cousin. He attempted to sow dissent and split the monastic community. He hired assassins to kill the Buddha. When that failed, he climbed a mountain and rolled a massive boulder down upon him, succeeding only in splintering a rock that grazed the Buddha's foot. In a final, desperate act, he got an elephant named Nalagiri, drunk on palm wine, and unleashed it, a maddened, trumpeting beast, directly into the Buddha's path. In the face of each of these attempts on his life, the Buddha's response was unwavering. He felt no anger, no fear, and no desire for revenge. Instead, his heart radiated a powerful and consistent field of metta and karuna. He saw Devadatta not as an evil monster, but as a profoundly tormented individual, a prisoner of his own insatiable ambition and hatred. The Buddha's compassion was so tangible and powerful that as the crazed elephant charged, it is said that it was stopped in its tracks, pacified by the sheer force of the Buddha's loving kindness, and knelt before him. This story reveals that metta and karuna are not the weak, passive, or sentimental emotions we sometimes imagine them to be. They are the ultimate strengths. They are an invisible shield that no hatred can pierce, and a healing balm that can soothe the deepest wounds. They represent a power far greater and more enduring than the fleeting, reactive power of violence or aversion. The cultivation of loving kindness and compassion is the most direct method for actively changing the reflection in the mirror. For most of our lives, we unconsciously project the energy of our inner state onto the world. If our mind is filled with judgment, indifference, and resentment, the world naturally reflects back to us a reality that seems cold, alienating, and hostile. We get back what we put out. The practices of metta and karuna are the conscious decision to change the projection. By systematically and diligently cultivating an inner sun of unconditional goodwill, we begin to shine that warmth onto everyone we meet. The reflection cannot help but change. We begin to notice the kindness in others that we were previously blind to. Our relationships become more harmonious and less conflict-ridden. We ourselves become a source of peace and safety for those around us. This proactive cultivation of wholesome states marks a crucial evolution on our path. We have moved from simply observing our mind to actively reshaping it. But for this beautiful intention to be truly effective, it must be guided by a clear and accurate understanding of reality. Good intentions without wisdom can go astray. Therefore, we must now turn our attention to ensuring that our newly cultivated heart is guided by a clear-seeing eye. We must explore the nature of wise view and wise intention, adjusting the angle, the role of wise view and intention. In our journey to polish the great mirror of our lives, we have learned how to clean its surface with the cloth of mindfulness and how to systematically deep clean it through the focused practice of meditation. We have also explored the active cultivation of beautiful qualities like loving kindness and compassion, learning how to consciously project warmth and goodness onto the world, thereby changing the reflection we receive. But a warm heart, full of good feeling, is not enough on its own. A powerful engine without a rudder and a compass can drive a ship onto the rocks just as easily as it can guide it to the safe harbor. Our spiritual journey requires not only the engine of a compassionate heart, but also the clear guidance of a wise mind. We need an accurate map of the territory and a firm hand on the tiller to direct our course. This essential guidance system is provided by the next two factors of the path: wise view and wise intention. Together, they ensure that our energy is channeled effectively, that our kind heart is not misguided, and that we are not just polishing the mirror, but are learning to angle it correctly to reflect the deepest truths of existence. First, let us examine wise view, or Sammaditthi in Pali. It is the very first step of the Buddha's noble eightfold path. And for good reason. Our view, our perspective, our understanding of how the world works determines everything that follows. It is crucial to understand that wise view is not a command to blindly accept a set of religious dogmas. It is an invitation to adopt a working hypothesis, a conceptual framework that aligns with reality, and then to test it rigorously against our own direct experience. It is less like a creed to be believed, and more like an accurate map to be used on a journey. If you are given a map of a forest, you don't just worship the map, you use it to navigate. And as you walk the path, you verify that the map accurately represents the terrain. Wise view, at its core, is the direct opposite of the foundational ignorance we explored earlier. It is the conscious adoption of a perspective that sees things, as much as possible, as they truly are. This view primarily consists of a clear understanding of the law of karmathi, recognition that our intentional actions are the primary cause of our happiness and suffering. It involves a deep, functional understanding of the three marks of existence, that all conditioned things are impermanent, anicca, that clinging to them is inherently unsatisfactory, dukkha, and that there is no solid, separate self to be found within our experience, anatta. Living with a wrong view is like trying to navigate a complex city with a map of a different city altogether. It's confusing, frustrating, and every turn leads to a dead end. We feel lost and victimized. Wise view is like being handed the correct map. Suddenly, the landscape makes sense. We can see where the dead ends are. We can identify the most skillful routes, and we can move through the world with a growing sense of confidence and clarity. The transformative power of wise view becomes evident when we see how it reframes the challenges of our lives. Imagine two people who both lose their jobs on the same day. The first person is operating from a wrong view, a perspective rooted in ignorance. They see the job loss as a personal attack, a great injustice. Their mind is filled with thoughts like, "This is a disaster. Why does this always happen to me? My life is ruined." They are immediately consumed by the second arrows of anger, blame, and self-pity. Their subsequent actions are driven by desperation and fear. The second person, however, is cultivating a wise view. They also feel the initial pain of the loss. The first arrow is unavoidable, but their understanding of impermanence tells them that jobs, like all conditioned things, are not permanent. Their understanding of karma helps them to look at their own past actions and see if they contributed to the situation, not with blame, but with a desire to learn. Their understanding of no self helps them to not take the event as a fundamental indictment of their worth as a person. They see the situation not as a catastrophe, but as a natural, though difficult, part of life's unfolding. This view allows them to meet the challenge with resilience, equanimity, and a far greater capacity for skillful action. The external event was identical, but the inner view transformed the entire experience from a personal tragedy into a difficult but navigable life event. From this clear seeing of wise view, a new way of orienting ourselves in the world naturally arises. This is wise intention, or samma sankappa. If wise view is the map that shows us the terrain, wise intention is the conscious act of setting the rudder of our ship, of choosing our direction moment by moment. It is the quality of our motivation, the why behind our actions. The Buddhist tradition outlines 3 specific types of wise intention that stand as direct antidotes to the 3 poisons. The first is the intention of renunciation. This does not necessarily mean giving up all our possessions and living in a cave. It means the internal intention to renounce our obsessive clinging, to let go of our addiction to sensual pleasure, and to loosen our desperate grasp on ego and status. It is the conscious decision to turn the mind away from the path of greed. The second is the intention of goodwill. This is the active intention to meet all beings with friendliness and kindness. It is the deliberate choice to cultivate a heart free from ill will, resentment, and anger. It is the conscious application of metta, and it is the decision to turn our minds away from the path of aversion. The third is the intention of harmlessness. This is the active commitment to not cause suffering. to the best of our ability, to any living being, including ourselves. It is the intention to act from a place of deep empathy and compassion, or karuna. As we know, intention is the very heart of karma. Wise intention is the practice of consciously choosing to plant only the most wholesome seeds in our mind, seeds that we know will ripen into peace, happiness, and freedom for ourselves and others. The profound difference between actions motivated by wise versus unwise intentions is illustrated in the simple story of two people giving to charity. Imagine two wealthy business owners each decide to donate $1 million to build a new children's hospital. The external act is the same, the public benefit is the same, but their inner intentions, the karmic seeds they are planting, are worlds apart. The first business owner is motivated by ego and attachment. Their primary intention is to see their name in large letters on the front of the new building. They crave the public acclaim, the newspaper articles praising their philanthropy, and the enhanced social status it will bring. Their act of giving is a sophisticated form of greed, an investment in their own reputation. The second business owner is motivated by wise intention. Having seen the suffering of sick children and their families, they are moved by genuine compassion. Their intention is simply to alleviate that suffering. They may even choose to make their donation anonymously, as their goal is not personal recognition, but the well-being of others. Their action is born from the intentions of goodwill and harmlessness. In the end, a hospital is built in both cases, but the inner reflection created in the mirror of each donor's mind is completely different. The first donor has strengthened the grooves of ego, pride, and attachment in their mind, planting seeds that could easily lead to future suffering if, for instance, their donation is not praised as much as they had hoped. The second donor has strengthened the beautiful, liberating qualities of compassion and selflessness, planting seeds that will ripen as genuine inner peace and joy, independent of any external recognition. The view and the intention behind the act determined its ultimate karmic meaning. Wise view and wise intention are the intelligence and the will of our spiritual life. They are the cognitive aspects of the path that guide the heart's energy. They transform our life from a series of random, reactive stumbles in the dark into a conscious, purposeful, and graceful walk toward the light. By constantly checking our map and adjusting our rudder, we learn to navigate the complexities of life with ever-increasing skill and peace. We learn to adjust the angle of the mirror, not to create a distorted and flattering image, but to reflect the truth more and more clearly. But even with the clearest map and the best intentions for our journey forward, what do we do about the heavy baggage from our past? What about the old, deep stains on the mirror from past actions, the hurts we have caused and the hurts we have received that still cloud the reflection and weigh down our hearts? A clear path forward is not enough if we are still chained to the past. This brings us to the crucial practice of cleaning away old wounds, the liberating act of forgiveness, wiping the slate clean. Forgiveness as a path to freedom. We have now arrived at a crucial stage in our journey of polishing the mirror. We have learned to use the cloth of mindfulness to bring clarity to the present moment, the deep cleaning solvents of meditation to calm the mind, and the guiding light of wise view and intention to direct our path forward. We are learning to plant a beautiful garden in our hearts with the seeds of loving kindness and compassion. Yet, for many of us, the mirror remains clouded, not by the dust of the present moment, but by old, stubborn stains from the past. These are the deep marks left by hurts we have received and harm we have caused. They manifest in our hearts as resentment, grievance, bitterness, and guilt. These states are immensely heavy. They are like an anchor we drag behind us, preventing us from sailing freely into the future, no matter how skillfully we trim our sails. To be truly free, we must learn how to release this anchor. We must learn the profound and often misunderstood art of forgiveness. In the Buddhist tradition, forgiveness is not presented as a moral duty owed to another person. It is understood as a supreme act of self-love and a practical necessity for our own liberation. It is the courageous act of wiping the slate of our own heart clean, so that we may finally be free from the prison of the past. To engage with this practice, we must first deconstruct the common myths that surround the word forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying that what happened was okay. It is not condoning harmful behavior or absolving someone of responsibility for their actions. It is not a call to forget the past, as if it never happened, and it does not necessarily mean that you must reconcile with the person who harmed you or allow them back into your life if they are still a source of danger. Forgiveness is an entirely internal process. It is the conscious and deliberate decision to let go of the poison of anger, resentment, and the consuming desire for revenge that you have been carrying within your own heart. Its primary beneficiary is not the person who harmed you, it is you. The Buddha used a powerful and visceral analogy to describe the state of holding a grudge. He said that it is like picking up a burning hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. While you search for the right moment to throw it, while you carry it around waiting for your chance at revenge, who is the one being seared and burned? It is only you. The other person may be completely unaware of your suffering. Forgiveness, in its essence, is the moment of wisdom, when you realize how much pain this hot coal is causing you, and you make the sane and compassionate decision to simply open your hand and drop it. You do it not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve to be free from the pain of being burned. The process of forgiving another person is a journey of the heart that requires patience and courage. It often begins with allowing ourselves to fully acknowledge the pain of the first arrow, the hurt that was actually caused. We do not need to pretend we weren't wounded. We can honor our feelings of sadness and anger, giving them space without letting them consume us. The next step involves engaging our wise view. We make an effort to see the person who harmed us not as a one-dimensional villain, but as a complex and suffering human being. We reflect that their harmful action did not arise from a vacuum. It arose from their own potent combination of greed, aversion, and ignorance. Their action was a manifestation of their own pain, their own delusion. This perspective does not excuse their behavior, but it begins to depersonalize the injury. We start to see it less as a personal attack on me, and more as an unfortunate and impersonal unfolding of causes and condition. Following this, we reflect deeply on the price we are paying by continuing to carry the hot coal of our resentment. We notice the tension it creates in our body, the bitter taste it leaves in our mind, the way it closes our heart to joy and connection, the precious mental energy it consumes in replaying old stories. We see with stark clarity that our non-forgiveness is a poison we are willingly drinking every day. Finally, we can undertake the formal act of letting go. This can be a quiet meditation, a ritual, or a simple heartfelt intention. We can bring the person to mind and silently say, I have carried this anger for long enough. I see the harm that was done, and I see the suffering that drove you to do it. For the sake of my own peace, for the sake of my own freedom, I release you from the prison of my resentment. I will no longer carry this burden. The transformative journey of forgiveness is beautifully captured in the story of a young soldier returning from a brutal war. Though he has left the battlefield, the war continues to rage within his mind. He is haunted by nightmares of things he has seen and done. He is consumed by a visceral hatred for the soldiers he fought against. This hatred follows him home, poisoning his relationships with his family, making him irritable, suspicious, and unable to connect. He is physically safe, but his heart is a prisoner of war, chained to the very past he so desperately wants to escape. One day, he He encounters a wise meditation teacher who listens to his story with deep compassion. The teacher explains that his hatred is the hot coal he continues to carry, the very thing that prevents the wounds of war from healing. Reluctantly at first, the soldier begins the difficult practice of forgiveness. In his meditation, he learns to see his former enemies not as faceless monsters, but as young men, just like him, who were trapped in a horrific system of violence, driven by fear, propaganda, and their own conditioning. He practices wishing for them to be free from the same hatred that was consuming him. He extends compassion to them as suffering beings. It is a long, arduous process, filled with resistance and tears, but slowly, gradually, as he learns to drop the coal of his hatred, he finds that the nightmares begin to lose their power. The tension in his body begins to ease. His heart, for so long a clenched fist of rage, begins to open. He discovers that peace did not come when his enemies were punished, but only when he had the courage to release himself from the prison of his own bitterness. For many of us, the most difficult forgiveness is not for the wrongs done to us, but for the harm we have caused to others. The inner critic can be the most relentless tormentor of all, and we can cling to our own past mistakes with a ferocity of guilt and shame that we would never direct at another person. We must learn to turn the compassionate lens of forgiveness inward. The same logic applies. We must see our past self with kindness and wisdom. We must recognize that at the time we acted, we were also operating under the influence of ignorance and suffering. We did the best we could with the limited understanding, the clouded vision, and the unskillful habits we had at that time. To forgive ourselves is not to let ourselves off the hook or to abdicate responsibility. It is to accept our flawed humanity. It involves acknowledging the harm we caused, feeling genuine remorse, and making a powerful, heartfelt commitment to learn from our mistakes and act with greater wisdom and kindness in the future. It is the act of saying to our past self, "I see the mistake you made and the pain it caused. I forgive you for acting from a place of confusion. Your lesson has been learned. You are now free to grow." This self-compassion is the fertile ground from which all genuine change springs. Forgiveness, then, is the ultimate spring cleaning for the heart. It is the brave and liberating choice to stop allowing the events of the past, whether done by us or to us, to continue poisoning the present moment. By dropping the hot coals of resentment and guilt, we free up an immense amount of mental and emotional energy that can now be used for healing, growth, and the cultivation of joy. The mirror of the mind, once cleaned of these old, stubborn stains, becomes brighter, clearer, and more capable of reflecting the pristine beauty of the present moment. Having learned to clear our minds of both present moment clutter and the grievances of the past, we are now far better equipped to engage with the world. We can now begin to explore how to bring this clarified, compassionate awareness into the most challenging arenas of our daily lives, starting with the complex and often stressful world of our work. The mindful workplace, seeing a demanding boss as a reflection. We have spent a great deal of time on our journey, learning to polish the mirror of the mind in the quiet sanctuary of our own practice. We have learned to sit with our breath, to forgive the past, and to cultivate a heart of compassion. But the true test of our practice does not happen on the meditation cushion. The true test happens when we must take our polished mirror out into the chaos and complexity of the world. And for many of us in the modern age, there is no arena more challenging, no environment more ripe with triggers for greed, aversion, and ignorance than the workplace. The modern workplace is often a battlefield for our attention, a pressure cooker for our emotions, and a stage upon which our deepest insecurities and egoic drives are played out. Deadlines, competition, difficult colleagues, and the relentless pressure to perform can feel like a direct assault on the inner peace we are trying so hard to cultivate. The conventional approach is to see work as a problem to be managed or a game to be won. We develop strategies to get ahead, to protect ourselves, and to defeat our rivals. But the path of wisdom offers a radically different approach. It invites us to transform the workplace from a source of stress into a rich and fertile field for practice. It asks us to see every challenge, every frustration, and even every difficult personality not as an obstacle to our peace, but as a perfect, tailor-made opportunity for our growth. It invites us to look at the most demanding aspects of our job, such as a difficult boss, and ask the brave question, what is this reflection trying to teach me? Let us take this most common and potent of workplace challenges, the demanding, critical, or micromanaging boss. For most of us, the immediate and automatic reaction to such a person is aversion. We label them as the source of our suffering. Our inner narrative becomes a story of a virtuous, hard-working victim, us, being tormented by a tyrannical and unreasonable villain, them. We spend our evenings complaining about them. Our minds are filled with imaginary arguments, and our bodies are tense with resentment every time we see an email from them appear in our inbox. This perspective, while completely understandable, locks us into a karmic loop of anger and victimhood. The mindful approach asks us to pause, to take a breath, and to look deeper into the mirror of this difficult relationship. It asks us to shift the focus from blaming the reflection to understanding what it reveals. First, we turn the mirror toward ourselves and ask, what is this situation reflecting about my own inner landscape? When my boss criticizes my work, what is the actual feeling that arises? Is it just annoyance, or is it a deeper, more painful feeling of inadequacy, a fear of not being good enough? Perhaps this dynamic is simply illuminating a deep-seated belief, a powerful sankhara or habitual groove that I have carried since childhood. In this case, my boss is not the primary cause of my suffering. They are merely the trigger for a pre-existing wound. If my boss micromanages me, what does that reflect? Does it trigger a feeling of being untrustworthy, activating a deep fear that I will be exposed as an imposter? Or consider the poison of greed. Am I clinging to the need for their constant approval? Is my sense of well-being so dependent on their praise that even neutral feedback feels like a catastrophe? By looking at our own reactions in this honest way, the situation becomes less about them and more about us. It is no longer a problem to be solved out there, but an inner pattern to be understood and healed in here. Next, we turn the mirror towards them, not with judgment, but with the lens of compassion. We ask, what might their behavior be reflecting about their inner world? Is their demanding nature a reflection of the immense, unseen pressure they are under from their own superiors? Is their obsessive need for control a reflection of their own deep-seated anxiety, their terror of failure? Is their harsh criticism of others simply an outward expression of a brutal inner critic that torments their own mind every single day? When we begin to see their actions not as personal attacks, but as the outward symptoms of their own suffering, their own entrapment in the poisons of greed, aversion, and ignorance, the entire dynamic changes. Our anger and resentment can begin to soften into a form of compassion. This does not mean we must condone or accept abusive behavior. Boundaries are still essential, but it fundamentally shifts the emotional charge of the relationship. The story of righteous victim versus evil villain dissolves, and in its place, a more complex and truthful narrative appears. The story of two human beings, caught in a stressful situation, both struggling with their own vulnerabilities and conditioned habits. This view is the doorway to skillful action. With this new, more spacious perspective, we can begin to transform our communication at work from a source of conflict into a practice of mindfulness. This begins with deep listening. Most of the time, we do not listen to understand. We listen in order to reply. We are busy formulating our defense, our rebuttal, our own brilliant point, while the other person is still speaking. Deep listening is the intentional act of offering our full, undivided attention to another person. When your boss or colleague is speaking, you put down your phone, turn away from your computer, and listen with your whole being. You listen not just to the surface level words, but to the underlying meaning, the emotions, and the unmet needs. Behind a colleague's anxious rambling about a project, you might hear a deep-seated fear of failure. Behind your boss's demanding tone, you might hear the stress of their own immense responsibility. A powerful tool of deep listening is to reflect back what you have heard. Simple phrases like, "So, if I am hearing you correctly, your primary concern is the client's deadline. Is that right?" can be incredibly de-escalating. It shows the other person that you are not an adversary, but a partner. It makes them feel seen, heard, and understood, which instantly lowers their defenses and creates a space for genuine collaboration. The other half of mindful communication is wise speech. This is the application of the principles we have learned to our own verbal output. In the workplace, this means making a conscious commitment to abstain from the poison of office gossip and divisive talk, recognizing that it harms not only the person being talked about, but also the overall atmosphere of trust and our own integrity. It means learning to give and receive feedback with skill. When offering criticism, we can do so with kindness and a genuine desire to help, rather than a desire to assert our superiority. When receiving criticism, we can practice listening without defensiveness, seeing it as valuable data rather than a personal attack. Wise speech also involves using I statements to express our own needs without blame. Instead of saying, "You set an impossible deadline," which triggers defensiveness, we can say, "I am feeling concerned about my ability to meet this deadline with the current resources." This reframes the issue from a personal conflict to a shared problem to be solved. And sometimes, wise speech means choosing the power of silence, knowing that not every comment needs a reply, and not every battle needs to be fought. Let us imagine a case study. Sarah works for a highly demanding boss, Mr. Evans. For years, her experience has been one of constant stress and anxiety. She feels he is always finding fault with her work, and she lives in a state of dread. Her old karmic loop is clear. Mr. Evans sends a critical email, stimulus. Sarah feels a surge of inadequacy and resentment, painful feeling, and she reacts by working frantically late into the night, fueled by anxiety and bitterness, which only reinforces her belief that her job is a miserable prison, replanting the seed. One day, she begins to practice mindfulness. The next time a critical email arrives, instead of reacting, she pauses. She notices the immediate tightening in her stomach and the hot flush of shame in her face. She just sits with those physical sensations for a few moments, breathing. She doesn't have to do anything about them. In that space, she begins to look in the mirror. She recognizes that his criticism triggers a very old story in her mind about not being good enough. She also reflects on Mr. Evans, and for the first time, sees the deep weariness and stress in his own eyes, realizing he is likely terrified of his own failures. In their next meeting, when he starts to criticize a report, she practices deep listening. Instead of defending herself, she says, "It sounds like you're worried this report isn't strong enough for the board meeting. I want to make sure it's perfect. Could you show me the specific areas you feel need the most improvement?" This changes the entire energy of the room. He is taken aback by her non-defensive stance. He begins to explain his reasoning, rather than just stating his judgment. Sarah, in turn, is able to receive the feedback as useful information. Over time, while Mr. Evans remains a demanding boss, Sarah's inner experience of her job is completely transformed. She is no longer a victim. The stress still comes, but it passes through her without taking root. She has turned her greatest source of suffering into her most profound training ground. This is the ultimate potential of a mindful approach to our professional lives. We can reframe the entire purpose of our work. The conventional view sees work as a means to an end, a way to get money, status, and security. The mindful view sees work as a path in itself. Every project is an opportunity to cultivate patience. Every tight deadline is a chance to practice with stress. Every difficult colleague is a teacher of compassion. Every meeting is a laboratory for mindful communication. When we shift our inner goal from achieving success to engaging in practice, we discover a source of meaning and contentment that is not dependent on a promotion, a raise, or the approval of others. We learn to find peace not by changing our job, but by changing our mind. We transform the battlefield into a monastery, the office into a sacred space for awakening. Having learned to apply these profound principles to the structured and often impersonal world of our careers, we must now turn our attention to an even more complex, intimate, and emotionally charged arena. We must explore how this clear-seeing awareness can illuminate the beautiful and challenging reflections we find in our personal relationships. The mirror of intimacy, karma in personal relationships. If our work life is a field for practice, then our intimate relationships are the most intense and transformative crucibles of all. Our connections with romantic partners, close family members, and dear friends are the most powerful and revealing mirrors we will ever encounter. They are not like ordinary mirrors that reflect a simple, flat image. They are magnifying mirrors, capable of reflecting back at us our most subtle attachments, our deepest insecurities, our most tender and unhealed childhood wounds, and our greatest capacities for wisdom and love. The joy and the pain of our relationships are so intense precisely because of this magnifying quality. It is in the mirror of intimacy that we are offered the most profound opportunity to see ourselves clearly and to engage in the deepest work of polishing the mirror of our own heart. The Buddhist perspective invites us to reframe our relationships entirely, not as a source of happiness to be consumed or a contract for mutual benefit, but as a shared spiritual path, a sacred practice undertaken by two people who agree, consciously or unconsciously, to help each other wake up. When we enter into a close relationship, what is actually happening is the meeting and interaction of two vast and complex karmic fields. We are drawn to certain people not by random chance, but by a deep resonance, a subconscious recognition that this person's particular collection of karmic seeds, their habitual tendencies, will be the perfect catalyst for the ripening of our own. The things we love about them often mirror the wholesome qualities we wish to cultivate in ourselves. And the things that eventually drive us mad about them are almost always the perfect triggers for our own deepest wounds and unskillful habits. A partner's tendency toward emotional distance may perfectly trigger our dormant seed of abandonment anxiety. A friend's success may water our hidden seed of envy and inadequacy. In this sense, our loved ones become our greatest and most intimate spiritual teachers. They are the perfect gardeners for the soil of our storehouse consciousness, skillfully watering all the seeds that lie there, both the beautiful flowers of joy and connection, and the painful weeds of anger, fear, and jealousy. The habitual reaction to this painful ripening is, of course, to blame the gardener. We say, "You made me angry. Your actions hurt me. I would be happy if only you would change." We see them as the sole cause of our suffering. The path of wisdom invites us to make a radical shift in perspective, to move from the habit of external blame to the practice of internal inquiry. When a loved one's action causes us pain, we train ourselves to pause before reacting and to bravely look into the mirror they are holding up. Instead of asking, "Why did you do that to me?" We learn to ask the far more fruitful question, what is this situation reflecting back to me about myself? When my partner seems critical, am I able to see that their words are landing on a pre-existing wound, a deep-seated belief that I am not good enough? Perhaps the pain I feel is 90% old history and only 10% their actual words. When a friend seems to neglect me, does it reflect my own fear of being unimportant, a story I have been telling myself for decades? By shifting the question in this way, we reclaim our power. We cease to be a helpless victim of another person's behavior and become an empowered student of our own mind. This does not mean we absolve the other person of responsibility for their actions or that we accept unkind behavior. It simply means we take 100% responsibility for our reaction to their actions. We understand that our suffering is not caused by their behavior, but by the combination of their behavior and the dormant karmic seeds within us. This understanding is the foundation for a new kind of communication, one based on shared vulnerability rather than mutual accusation. A beautiful and practical tool for cultivating this kind of relationship is the practice of beginning anew, developed by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. It is a formal process that couples, families, or close friends can engage in to safely clear the air, prevent the buildup of resentment, and refresh their connection. The practice has 4 parts. First, each person takes a turn watering the flowers. They share specific things they love, admire, and appreciate about the other person. This begins the session on a foundation of positivity and reminds both people of the goodness in their bond. Second, each person has a chance to express regret. They can share something they did or said in the past week that they recognize may have been unskillful or caused hurt. This is not an apology forced by guilt, but a sincere act of taking responsibility for one's own actions. Third, and this is the most difficult part, each person has a chance to share a hurt they have experienced because of the other person's actions. The key is to do this without blame or accusation, using I statements. For instance, when you were on your phone while I was telling you about my difficult day, I felt hurt and unimportant. The other person's only job during this stage is to listen with their whole heart, without interrupting, defending, or explaining themselves. Their task is simply to receive the other's truth with compassion. The fourth step, which can be done at the end, is to discuss any lingering issues and perhaps make a request for future behavior. This structured practice creates a safe container where truths can be spoken kindly, where listening happens deeply, and where the small hurts that can accumulate and poison a relationship are regularly and gently wiped clean. This journey from the fantasy of perfect romance to the reality of deep, compassionate love is captured in the parable of the old couple and their mirrors. A young person, about to be married, asks an elderly couple who have been together for more than 60 years for their secret. The old woman smiles and says, "When we were young and first fell in love, we were like 2 new, perfectly polished mirrors. When I looked at him, I saw only a reflection of my own joy, my own beauty, my own hopes. When he looked at me, he saw the same. It was intoxicating, and it was easy to love that perfect, shining reflection." She continued, "But life is not a still pond. Over the decades, life happened. My mirror got scratched by sadness and loss. It got chipped by fear. His mirror got dented by disappointment and worn down by worry. And after a while, when we looked at each other, we began to see the scratches, the chips, and the dents. We reflected back each other's imperfections, each other's pain. This," she said, "is the difficult part of love. This is the moment when many people decide their mirror is broken, and they throw it away to search for a new, shiny one." "So what is the secret?" the young person asked. The old woman reached out and took her husband's hand. "The secret is that we learn to love the mirror itself, not just the reflection. We learn to love the person, with all their scratches, chips, and dents. We learned to hold each other's imperfect mirror with tenderness, and to help each other polish away the dust when we could. True love is not about finding a perfect mirror that will reflect a perfect image of you forever. True love is about finding a fellow flawed mirror and choosing to spend a lifetime together, learning how to see clearly and to love what you see, scratches and all. Our intimate relationships, therefore, are our greatest opportunity for spiritual growth. They are the fiercest fire for the purification of our ego and the most fertile ground for the cultivation of a boundless heart. The people we love are not here to make us happy. They are here to help us wake up. By seeing them as a reflection of our own mind, by taking full responsibility for our half of the karmic dance, and by committing to the practices of deep listening and kind speech, we can transform our relationships from a source of conflict and misunderstanding into a shared and beautiful path of awakening. Having applied these principles of mindful awareness to the structured world of our work and the intimate world of our love, we must now turn our gaze to one of the most powerful and pervasive forces in our modern lives, a force that promises us endless happiness but often delivers only a deeper sense of lack. We must now examine the reflection we find when we look into the mirror of materialism, reflecting simplicity, finding true wealth beyond materialism. Having explored the intricate reflections within our professional and personal relationships, we now turn our gaze to one of the most powerful and pervasive mirrors in modern society, the mirror of materialism. We live immersed in a culture that broadcasts one single, relentless message. Happiness is something that can be bought. Freedom, we are told, is the ability to purchase what we want. Meaning is found in the accumulation of possessions and status. This belief system is a kind of default modern religion, with shopping malls as its cathedrals and advertisements as its gospels. It is the most widespread and socially acceptable manifestation of the poison of greed, a collective trance that convinces us that the key to a fulfilling life lies outside of ourselves, waiting on a store, shelf, or in a bank account. We are taught to look into the mirror of materialism and see our own reflection as incomplete, inadequate, and in constant need of an upgrade. This section of our journey is about seeing through that distorted reflection and discovering a source of wealth that can never be bought, sold, or devalued. The great promise of materialism, that acquiring things will bring lasting happiness, is ultimately an empty one. Its failure to deliver is built into its very mechanics. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as the hedonic treadmill. Our minds are incredibly skillful at adapting to new circumstances. When we finally acquire the new car, the bigger house, or the expensive watch we have been craving, there is an initial surge of pleasure and satisfaction. But very quickly, this new level of luxury becomes our baseline, our new normal. The thrill fades, and the object that once seemed so desirable is now just part of the furniture of our lives. To get the same jolt of excitement, we must now set our sights on something even bigger, better, and more expensive. We are trapped on a treadmill, running faster and faster just to stay in the same place emotionally, a state of perpetual wanting. This pursuit is not only unsatisfying, it is a source of profound anxiety. We endure immense stress, working long hours in jobs we may not enjoy, simply to afford the lifestyle we believe will make us happy. We take on the heavy burden of debt, which becomes a constant source of low-grade fear in the back of our minds. And once we have accumulated these possessions, a new anxiety arises, the fear of losing them. Our houses, which were meant to be shelters, become sources of worry about mortgages and maintenance. Our cars, meant to be instruments of freedom, become sources of anxiety about theft, damage, and depreciation. Our possessions, which were supposed to serve us, become our demanding and unforgiving masters. there is also a great opportunity cost. The immense amount of time, energy, and life force that we pour into chasing, acquiring, maintaining, and worrying about material things is a finite resource. It is energy that cannot be spent on the things that spiritual traditions throughout history have pointed to as the sources of genuine, enduring fulfillment. Cultivating our minds, nurturing our relationships, serving our communities, and connecting with the natural world. The wisdom of the Buddhist path offers a radical and liberating redefinition of wealth. Our materialistic culture defines wealth as the ability to have more. The spiritual path defines true wealth as the state of needing less. The goal is not accumulation, but contentment. In Pali, this quality is called santuthi. Contentment is not a joyless life of grim austerity or passive resignation. It is the joyful, empowered, and deeply peaceful discovery that our fundamental well-being is not dependent on external conditions. It is an inner richness, a sense of enoughness that cannot be granted by a promotion or taken away by a stock market crash. It is the cultivation of a mind that knows how to appreciate what it has, rather than obsessing over what it lacks. It is a training in seeing the profound abundance that already exists in a simple life. It is the practice of finding immense richness in a shared conversation with a friend, in the taste of a simple meal, in the beauty of a sunset, in the gift of our own breath. This is the only form of wealth that is truly secure. The stark contrast between these two views of wealth is brilliantly captured in the classic story of the meeting between Diogenes, the philosopher, and Alexander the Great. Alexander was, by any worldly standard, the wealthiest and most powerful man alive. He was the conqueror of most of the known world, a ruler of vast empires, commanding immense armies and possessing unimaginable treasures. He had heard tales of a strange but brilliant philosopher named Diogenes, who lived a life of radical simplicity, famously making his home in a large ceramic jar in the marketplace. Intrigued, Alexander went with his royal entourage to meet him. He found Diogenes relaxing in the morning sun, possessing nothing but the simple robe on his back. Alexander, the master of the world, stood before the man who owned nothing. Wishing to display his power and generosity, Alexander announced, "I am Alexander the Great. Ask of me any favor you wish, and I will grant it to you." He was offering Diogenes anything he could possibly desire from his vast treasury. Diogenes looked up from his spot on the ground, seemingly unimpressed. He replied calmly and directly, "Yes, there is one thing you can do for me. Please stand to one side. You are blocking my sunlight." This simple response is one of the most profound teachings on wealth in all of Western philosophy. In that moment, who was the richer man? Who was the more powerful? Alexander, who possessed the entire world, could not give Diogenes anything he truly valued. For Diogenes' happiness came from a source Alexander did not control, the simple, present, and freely available warmth of the sun. Diogenes, who had nothing, needed nothing, not even from the most powerful man on earth. His contentment was his invulnerable fortress. We do not need to live in a ceramic jar to experience this freedom. We can begin to cultivate contentment and reflect simplicity in our own lives through a series of practical, mindful steps. The first is to practice mindful consumption. Before making any non-essential purchase, we can learn to pause and ask a few simple questions. Do I truly need this, or do I just want this? What is the underlying feeling I am hoping to get from this object? Am I feeling bored, insecure, or lonely? Can I address that feeling in a more direct and skillful way, without acquiring another thing? This simple pause can break the hypnotic spell of compulsive consumerism. we can also discover the joy of letting go. Many of us can practice decluttering our homes, not as a tedious chore, but as a joyful and liberating spiritual practice. As we go through our possessions, we can give away those things we no longer use, recognizing that they might be of great benefit to someone else. Every object we release is a small act of non-attachment, a weakening of the fist of greed, and an exercise in generosity. Most importantly, we can consciously shift our focus toward appreciating the vast, non-material wealth we already possess, the miracle of our body and its senses, the love and support of our friends and family, the privilege of living on a beautiful planet, and the priceless gift of our own awareness. When we begin to truly value these things, the glittering allure of material possessions begins to fade. The mirror of materialism reflects a promise of happiness that is, by its very nature, a mirage, always shimmering on the horizon, but never reachable. By seeing through this collective delusion and actively cultivating the inner wealth of contentment, we unchain ourselves from the exhausting treadmill of wanting more. We find that true abundance was never about what we could accumulate in the world, but about the quality of attention and gratitude we could bring to our lives. This profound freedom from the need for external validation and acquisition naturally opens up a new and beautiful possibility. When we are no longer consumed with the project of satisfying our own endless desires, our hearts and our energy become available for a greater purpose. We discover that the deepest and most stable form of fulfillment comes not from helping ourselves, but from being of service to others. This naturally leads us to the next stage of our journey, the shift from a path of self-improvement to a path of selfless contribution, the expansive and compassionate ideal of the Bodhisattva, the interconnected reflection, from self-help to helping all beings. Throughout our long journey together, the primary focus has been an inward one. We have learned to examine our own minds, to take responsibility for our own karmic creations, to heal our own wounds, and to cultivate our own inner peace. To an outside observer, this entire process could seem like a highly refined form of self-help, an elaborate system for constructing a private, internal sanctuary, a peaceful refuge sealed off from the suffering of the world. But to see the path in this way is to stop just short of its most profound and liberating revelation. True and lasting peace cannot be found in isolation. The logical and heartfelt conclusion of looking deeply into our own suffering is the dawning recognition of the suffering of others. The compassionate attention we learn to offer ourselves naturally begins to overflow, extending to all those around us. The path, if followed sincerely, undergoes a great and beautiful pivot. The central question of our lives subtly shifts from, how can I find happiness and freedom for myself, to the far more expansive and meaningful question, how can I contribute to the happiness and freedom of all? This is not a moral burden we are forced to take on. It is the spontaneous unfolding of wisdom, the natural consequence of a polished mirror. As the grime of our own ego and self-concern is wiped away, we begin to see that the reflection in our mirror is not separate from the reflections in every other mirror. We realize that my liberation and your liberation are not two different things. This profound shift is rooted in the wisdom of interbeing, a term beautifully articulated by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. Interbeing is the experiential reality behind the philosophical doctrine of no self, anatta. It is the understanding that nothing in this universe exists independently. Everything is intricately connected to and composed of everything else. Thich Nhat Hanh often explained this with a simple sheet of paper. When we look at a sheet of paper, our ordinary perception sees just that, a distinct object, a sheet of paper. But when we look with the eyes of interbeing, we see far more. We see the cloud that provided the rain for the forest. We see the sunshine that nourished the tree. We see the logger who cut the tree down, and we can see the wheat in the bread that the logger ate for breakfast. We can see the soil, the minerals, the entire ecosystem of the forest. We can see the labor of the people who transported the wood and the technology of the factory that pressed it into paper. If we were to remove any one of these elements, if we remove the sun or the cloud or the logger, the sheet of paper could not exist. The paper, therefore, is full of everything we might call non-paper. It interis with the entire cosmos. Now, let us apply this same deep looking to ourselves. When we look in the mirror, we see a seemingly solid, separate person. But if we look with the eyes of interbeing, we see that I am also full of non-me elements. The food I ate for breakfast is in me. The air I am breathing, which was breathed by countless other beings, is in me. The DNA of my parents and all my ancestors is in me. The ideas I have learned from my teachers and my culture are in me. If we were to remove all these non-me elements, there would be no me left. The line we draw between self and other, between me and the universe, is a purely conceptual one, a convenient fiction. In reality, we are all woven from the same cosmic fabric. This understanding completely reframes our notion of karma. If we inter-are, then the idea of a purely selfish or purely altruistic act becomes a logical impossibility. When I act with anger and cause harm to another, I am not harming a separate entity. I am introducing a poison into the intricate web of existence, of which I am an inseparable part. In a very real sense, I am harming myself. Conversely, when I act with kindness and help another being, I am not just helping them. I am contributing to the healing and well-being of the whole, which includes me. My personal happiness becomes inextricably linked to the happiness of all beings. There is a magnificent and ancient metaphor from Mahayana Buddhism that illustrates this vision of reality, the celestial net of the god Indra. In Indra's heavenly realm, there hangs a vast and shimmering net that stretches out to infinity in all directions. At every single node where the threads of this net cross, there is a single, perfectly clear, multifaceted jewel. The most miraculous quality of this net is that if you were to look closely into the polished surface of any one jewel, you would see reflected within it every single other jewel in the entire infinite net. And if you were to look even more closely into any of those reflections, you would see that each one also contains a perfect reflection of all the other jewels, and so on, ad infinitum. Each jewel in this net represents a single life, a single consciousness. It is distinct and occupies its own unique position, yet, at the same time, it contains and is contained by the whole. The state of any one jewel is instantly reflected in all the others. A shadow passing over one jewel casts a subtle shade on every other jewel. The brilliant shining of one jewel adds to the luminosity of the entire net. This is the vision of interbeing. We are at once an individual jewel and the entire net. Our individual consciousness is a precious, unique vantage point from which the universe experiences itself, and the entire universe is present in and reflected by our individual consciousness. When this profound understanding moves from an intellectual concept to a deeply felt reality in the heart, it gives birth to the noblest ideal of the spiritual path, the ideal of the Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is literally an enlightenment being. It is a person who has dedicated their entire existence over countless lifetimes to the goal of becoming fully awakened, not for their own sake, but for the sake of liberating all other beings from suffering. The traditional vow of the Bodhisattva expresses this radical reorientation of purpose. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them all. The gates of Dharma are boundless. I vow to enter them all. The way of the Buddha is unsurpassable. I vow to achieve it. This vow is not an expression of arrogant ego, but the ultimate expression of selfless compassion. It is the recognition that as long as even one jewel in Indra's net is clouded by suffering, my own jewel cannot shine with its full, untarnished brilliance. The most powerful image associated with this ideal is that of a being who has journeyed the entire path, has purified their mind completely, and has arrived at the very gates of nirvana, the final cessation of personal suffering. They are about to step into a state of everlasting peace, but at the threshold, they pause. They hear the faint cries of suffering still emanating from the world they are leaving behind, and moved by an overwhelming and unbearable compassion, they make the conscious choice to turn back. They willingly re-enter the world of birth and death, the world of karmic loops and the three poisons, vowing not to enter their final peace until every last being, down to the last blade of grass, has been safely guided to the shores of liberation. This is the ultimate expression of interbeing. It is the lived understanding that my liberation is a meaningless concept. There is only our liberation. This magnificent ideal might seem impossibly lofty, reserved for mythological saints from ancient scriptures, but the spirit of the Bodhisattva can be practiced and embodied by anyone, in any moment. It is not about being perfect. It is about the direction of our heart. A teacher who stays late after school to help a struggling student, seeing that student's success as their own, is walking the Bodhisattva path. A parent who wakes in the middle of the night to patiently soothe a crying child, putting the child's well-being before their own desire for sleep, is embodying the spirit of the Bodhisattva. An activist who works tirelessly to protect the environment for future generations, a nurse who tends to the sick with unwavering kindness, a friend who listens with their whole heart to another's pain without needing to fix it all. Of these are expressions of the Bodhisattva ideal in action. It is the simple, moment-to-moment choice to make our lives a gift to the world, to orient ourselves around the question, how can I be of service? This final, great shift in perspective from self-help to selfless service is the ultimate act of polishing the mirror. As long as we are polishing the mirror only for our own benefit, to see our own beautiful reflection, there is still a subtle clinging to the idea of a separate me who is doing the polishing and a separate mirror that is being polished. The ego is still subtly in charge of the project, but when we dedicate our practice to the welfare of all, when we polish the mirror with the sincere intention that its clarity may help to illuminate the path for others, the very act of polishing becomes selfless. The ego begins to dissolve into the work itself. Our personal peace becomes indivisible from the peace of the world. We find the deepest and most sustainable happiness, not when we have finally perfected our own small corner of the universe, but when we recognize ourselves as one interconnected part of a vast, sacred whole, and we dedicate our energy to helping every part of it shine as brightly as possible. This profound realization, this merging of the self with all of life, brings us to the threshold of our final inquiry. What is the nature of this ultimate freedom? What is the state of consciousness where the watcher and the reflection, the individual jewel and the entire net, are no longer experienced as separate things at all? This is the state known as nirvana. The mirror and the face are one, the ultimate freedom of nirvana. We have now traveled the entire length of the path. We have followed the map of the teachings from the foundational law of karma to the intricate workings of the mind, through the dark valleys of the three poisons and the winding grooves of habit. We have learned to polish the mirror with mindfulness, to clean it with meditation, to illuminate it with compassion, and to angle it with wisdom. We have seen how our individual reflection is inseparable from the great, interconnected web of all life. We arrive now at the final destination pointed to by the map, the ultimate goal of this entire spiritual journey. This is the state known as nirvana. It is a word that is famous throughout the world, yet it is shrouded in mystery and profound misunderstanding. We tend to imagine it as a kind of heavenly paradise, a blissful place we go to after we die, perhaps with clouds, golden light, and celestial music. But these are projections of our own conditioned minds, attempts to grasp the ungraspable with the familiar tools of desire and imagination. The reality of nirvana is something far more radical, more immediate, and more liberating than any imagined heaven. It is not a place you go to, it is a truth you awaken to. It is the final, irreversible dissolution of suffering, available right here, in this very life. To truly understand nirvana, we must begin with its literal meaning. The Sanskrit word nirvana, or nibbana in Pali, means to extinguish, to blow out, or to quench, as one would extinguish a flame. This immediately begs the question, what is it that is being extinguished? The terrified ego fears that it is life itself, that nirvana is a state of blank annihilation or nothingness. But this is the ultimate misunderstanding. What is extinguished is not life, not consciousness, not joy. What is extinguished, completely and forever, are the fires that cause all our suffering. What is blown out is the scorching flame of greed, the burning fever of aversion, and the thick, suffocating smoke of ignorance. Our ordinary, unawakened state of being is a state of being constantly on fire. We are burning with the desire for things to be other than they are. We are burning with the resistance to what is. We are lost in the disorienting smoke of our own confusion. All of our stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction are dukkhais, the heat and pain generated by these relentless, consuming flames. Nirvana is the state of profound and unshakable peace that is revealed when these fires have been completely quenched. It is not the addition of some new, blissful state. It is the subtraction of all that is stressful, painful, and untrue. It is the exquisite coolness, the absolute tranquility, the pristine clarity of the mind that remains when the causes of suffering have been permanently removed. This extinguishing of the fires leads to the most profound shift in perception imaginable, the collapse of the distinction between subject and object, between the watcher and the watched. Throughout our journey, we have used the metaphor of us polishing the mirror. We, the subject, are looking at our reflection, the object. This duality is a useful convention for the path, but in the ultimate reality of nirvana, this separation is revealed to be an illusion. The awakened mind realizes that there is no separate, solid I on this side of the eyes, looking out at a separate, independent world on the other side. There is only a single, seamless, unified process of experiencing. The knower, the act of knowing, and the thing which is known are discovered to be inseparable aspects of one dynamic, ownerless, unfolding. The mirror and the face looking into it are realized to be made of the very same substance, a boundless, luminous, and empty awareness. The lifelong struggle ends because the two perceived combatants, the me that wants things and the world that resists mere, discovered to be a single, unified field. The deep, painful, and primal sense of being an isolated self, a lonely protagonist battling against the universe, completely and utterly dissolves. A beautiful and poetic analogy for this merging is that of a single drop of water falling toward the ocean. Perched on a leaf, the drop has a clear and distinct identity. It has a boundary, a shape, a sense of I am a drop. Looking down at the vast, endless expanse of the ocean below, it feels a profound terror. It fears its own annihilation. It believes that if it falls and merges with the ocean, it will die. It will cease to be. This is the fundamental fear of the ego, fear of losing its precious, cherished sense of separateness. But the ocean, in its deep wisdom, could whisper back, "You do not understand. Your identity as a separate drop has always been temporary and conditional. Your true nature has always been water. You are not a drop fearing the ocean. You are the ocean, remembering itself through the experience of being a drop. Trusting in this truth, the drop finally lets go. It falls. It touches the surface, and it merges. Does the drop die? In a way, yes. It ceases to exist as a separate drop, but it is not annihilated. It is liberated. It is liberated from the fragile, temporary, and vulnerable identity of drop into the boundless, eternal, and all-encompassing reality of ocean. Its so-called death is its ultimate homecoming. This is the experience of nirvana. The small, constricted ego self, the I we have spent our whole lives defending and promoting, dissolves not into nothingness, but into the unconditioned, boundless nature of reality itself. What are the qualities of a mind that has realized this ultimate freedom? While it is beyond full description in conventional language, the scriptures describe the awakened mind as having several key characteristics. The first is an unshakable peace. This is not the fragile peace that depends on having a quiet room or a pleasant day. It is a deep, abiding tranquility that remains present even in the midst of sickness, loss, or worldly turmoil. It is the peace of the deep ocean, which remains still even when its surface is battered by storms. The second quality is a boundless and spontaneous compassion. With the artificial barrier between self and other completely dissolved, the well-being of others is experienced as being identical to one's own. Compassion is no longer a practice one has to cultivate. It is the natural, effortless radiance of an awakened heart, flowing out to all beings without distinction or prejudice. The third quality is spontaneous, skillful action. Actions are no longer motivated by the greedy or fearful calculations of the ego. They arise perfectly and effortlessly in response to the needs of the situation, free from the stain of any selfish agenda. Finally, there is a profound fearlessness. The deepest fear of all is the ego's fear of its own death. When the ego is clearly seen to be an illusion, a temporary construct of thought, this foundational fear is completely uprooted. The mind is left in a state of radical openness, courage, and ease, no longer at war with life, but flowing in perfect harmony with it. Nirvana is not a myth. It is not a far-off, unattainable dream reserved for saints in ancient times. It is the innate potential for peace and freedom that lies at the very core of our own consciousness, waiting to be uncovered. It is the pristine, stainless surface of the mirror that has been there all along, obscured by the dust, grime, and fire of our own untamed minds. The entire path that we have explored together, the path of ethical action, of mental discipline, and of liberating wisdomness, nothing more than the systematic and practical process of creating the conditions for those fires to subside and for that original clarity to reveal itself. The ultimate freedom, the state where the mirror and the face are one, is the birthright of every human being who has the courage to turn their gaze inward and to undertake, with patience and sincerity, the profound journey of self-realization. We have traveled a great and winding path together, a journey that began in the claustrophobic confines of a traffic jam, feeling like a victim of a world that was hostile and overwhelming. We began by looking at the flawed and frustrating reflections of our lives, believing the problem was out there. But then, we made a pivotal turn. We began to entertain a radical possibility that the world is not a source, but a mirror, and that the reflection it shows us is nothing more and nothing less than the contents of our own mind. On this journey, we have gathered the tools to understand this profound truth. We learn to see the smudges on the mirror as the three poisons of greed, aversion, and ignorance. We learn to see the deep scratches as the grooves of our own karmic habits. And then we began the gentle work of healing. We picked up the soft cloth of mindfulness, learning to see our present moment experience with clarity. We set aside time for the deep cleaning of meditation, allowing the turbulent waters of our minds to settle. We learned to apply the healing balm of forgiveness to the old, stubborn stains of the past. And we discovered that we could change the reflection altogether by projecting the light of loving kindness and the warmth of compassion from our own hearts, guided by the clear eye of wisdom. We followed this path to its ultimate conclusion, to the liberating realization that the mirror and the face looking into it are not two separate things, but one seamless, interconnected reality. The core message of this entire journey is simple, yet it has the power to change everything. Peace is not a destination you must travel to. It is not a prize to be won, a product to be acquired, or a perfect set of external circumstances to be arranged. Peace is your original nature. It is the clarity of the mirror that lies beneath all the dust and grime. It is an internal state of being that can be cultivated, nurtured, and returned to in any given moment. The power to transform your life, to change the reflection from one of suffering to one of freedom, does not lie in changing the world. It lies entirely within your own hands, through the conscious, moment-to-moment choices you make with your mind, your speech, and your actions. You are not the reflection in the mirror. You are the awareness that is watching it. You are not the painting, full of struggle and strife. You are the artist who holds the brush. So take up the tools that you have learned. Pick up the brush of mindfulness. Dip it into the vibrant colors of compassion and the luminous hues of wisdom, and begin, today, to paint a life of meaning, of purpose, and of peace. You do not need to wait for a better moment. You do not need anyone's permission. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey to unshakable inner peace begins with a single conscious breath. It begins right now.